Good morning and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting of September 16th, 2008. Yeah, I think I may need to call it into session. Would you please rise to join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have one announcement this morning. No action was taken regarding a closed session held last week with counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9B1. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, and significant exposure to litigation, one case. We'll now move to the consent agenda. These are items expected to be routine and non-controversial. However, if anybody wishes to remove any item for further discussion, they may do so now. Anybody from the board?
Item number 3, please.
Item number 3 will be removed. Staff and public, any other items? Do I hear a motion on the ballots?
So moved. Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? That's 5-0. And we will now discuss item number 3. Supervisor Thomas.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chairman. On this particular item, this is a request to allocate up to $1,000 out of my discretionary funds that would be used to pay for advertising for the computer classes that I've been talking about for the last several weeks. I have been I'm very pleased to announce that the enterprise, Calaveras Enterprise, has graciously offered to put their printed ads in for zero cost. So I'm anticipating that the cost that would be paid out of this would be limited to about $500 worth of radio advertising from KVML in Tuolumne County. There's another aspect of this that needs some housekeeping, and this is a facilities agreement that I've been talking to CAO Lawton about, that we have to sign in order to use the lab for the 35 computer terminals that we need to conduct the classes. We have to sign a facilities agreement that acknowledges some certain financial responsibilities, liability responsibilities, and so I think that if you have questions about that, Bob could answer that.
Are there any questions?
I have one. Russ, do you have, this may depend on how this class goes, but there are plans to continue this?
Oh, yes.
Be successful for those that may not be able to enroll at this time?
Absolutely. There will be a significant effort made to build a database that will track the participants, how they came to know about it. It'll track their success, and I hate to be overly verbose about this, but it has been a methodology that's been developed over 7 years in another county, and I think we're extremely lucky to have this made available to us at a zero cost. I mean, $500 for this thing is really quite remarkable. But to specifically answer your question, yes, it is the intent. And as a matter of fact, the Tuolumne County, their participants are going to be, in large part, trainers that will come to observe and participate in this process. I want to clarify that it's 20 classes, not 35, like I mentioned last week. I've got calendars here for you, okay. But there will be 20 individual classes. The reason I got confused on that is because it said in the explanation that it was going to be Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, but I made the mistake of thinking that it was going to be all those, but it's not. They had to stitch around.
Various in the schedule.
Yeah, various stitch around type of things. So it will be 20 classes starting October 2nd, ending on December 20th.
Great.
Okay. But what I started to say was that the Tuolumne County participants for sure will be about 5 folks that are intended to be trainers that will get the training, as well as Keith Boggs, the person who is facilitating this for us, has graciously agreed that he will give them all of the training, everything that he's developed, all of the training documents. So I think that it has a potential for really escalating in the future. It could be, we're going to hopefully train 35 people. I think there's even one member of the Board of Supervisors who's salivating over the possibility, maybe 2. But okay, unless there's any other questions.
I just had a question. Did you propose that the chair sign this, or the CAO? The facility agreement?
Well, it's inconsequential to me. I mean, who signs it? It's just that I think that the county, I mean, this is just a necessary incremental step that we have to take to get this thing pulled off. It's the school district is just asking us to put our signature on this document that says that we've got insurance in case somebody stubs their toe. No different than we would be expecting of the farmers market out here that I was involved in recently. It's just...
it's inconsequential, but we need to know if the CEO is going to sign it.
What's your recommendation?
It doesn't matter, but we just need clear direction. Otherwise, the practice is the board chair signs documents. But
I'd be happy to sign the document.
Okay. That'll be fine. And so there's 2 elements here. That other was just for information purposes, but we do have the issue here about the minute order authorizing distribution of $1,000 from District 5 Supervisor's discretionary fund. I know that it will not exceed $500. In a truly democratic society, that $500 would be shared by all 5 districts, I would think. But
Cheap shot, Russ.
I guess that fell on deaf ears.
I'd be happy to note for the record that the supervisor from District 5 is being quite generous in sharing this with the rest of us, and that most often we have spent our discretionary funds within district. This is a case where the supervisor is offering a county-wide program using District 5 funds, and I'm certainly grateful for the gesture. Is there any further discussion on this before we entertain a motion?
Anyway, if there's no further discussion, I would move the item.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote. We now move to public comment. This is item 8. We would ask that people make their comments on items not on the agenda and confine their comments to 5 minutes per person and up to 15 minutes per topic. Sheriff Downham.
Hi, Dennis Downham, Sheriff. 2 things very briefly. First, I want to thank Supervisor Walensky and his wife for coming down and assisting our officer that wrecked his vehicle the other day. We appreciate that very much. We're having a very difficult time identifying the other gentleman that was there that actually cut him out of the vehicle. We're trying like heck to identify him, but he left before we could get his name.
I believe I can track him down.
Okay, if you could get that name to us, we'd certainly appreciate it. The officer's still in the hospital. We expect him to be there for a few more days. He's got apparently a rib punctured along, and so he'll be laid up for a while. The other thing is Thursday we will be in Berkeley for a Correction Standards Authority meeting. If the state follows its rules, we should come away with very, very good news. They've had like 4 major rules changes during this process, and none of those rule changes have helped us. But, well, if they stick to the rules that are in place now, we should come away very well. So hopefully by Thursday afternoon we'll have some good word. Okay.
Thank you. If you could please give the officer my regards and best hopes for recovery. I know that was, I didn't know you had an airborne division, but...
When I went down there the other night, I told him our primary concern was for him, his family, getting him well, and we'll kill him later for wrecking our car. We'll take care of it. But thank you.
It does reverse the trend for abandoned vehicles in District 2. We've been trying to actually take them out, but now we're importing them.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Other items from the public?
Paula Patton-Gale, and I am here as Domestic Animal Advisory Committee member from District 5. We have a complaint from our committee for failure to respond by the board to our letter of May 12th, in which we asked, what is the county's timeline for a new shelter? On top of that, there is the most recent grand jury report in which there is a recommendation by the grand jury for the sheriff and the board to develop and approve a plan for a new shelter with a specific timeline. The Board of Supervisors needs to allocate necessary funding, and a response was requested from both the board and the sheriff. Moreover, state law, SB 1785, otherwise referred to as the Hayden Bill, this was adopted July 1st, 1999, and amended July 1st, 2000, clearly states the public and private shelters and humane organizations should work together to end euthanasia of adoptable and treatable animals by the year 2010. Added to Section 1834.4A, the policy of the state that no adoptable animal should be euthanized, and B, it is a policy of the state that no treatable animal should be euthanized. A treatable animal shall include any animal that is adoptable but could become adoptable with reasonable efforts. Section 599D, which is added to the penal code, A, it is a policy of the state that no adoptable animal should be euthanized. The exceptions are for behavioral or temperamental defects, disease, injury, congenital or hereditary conditions that adversely affect the animal's health in the future. B, it is the policy of the state that no treatable animals shall be euthanized. Why compliance is currently not possible? It cannot be adhered to due to lack of space in the shelter. It cannot be adhered to for lack of an isolation room for contagious but treatable animals. These are the sneezing cats that are periodically euthanized. They are very treatable. It cannot be adhered to for lack of standardized record keeping of healthy adoptable, treatable adoptable, and unhealthy unadoptable animals. Therefore, goals cannot be measurable goals, cannot be maintained in order to set goals for the shelter. There's no designated veterinary clinic with trained staff. I'm not asking for a full-time veterinarian. I'm saying a licensed veterinary technician to fulfill care provided or dictated by a veterinarian who makes a diagnosis and prescription for in-house animals, and then the LVT carries it out. Record keeping does not comply with the Asilomar Accords that provides the 4 categories of shelter animals, which defines healthy adoptable, treatable adoptable, 2 categories, rehabilitatable, which requires in-house behavioral training and at least a minimal veterinary clinic, and manageable. This requires in-house veterinary clinic. This is the cat with diabetes that could be adopted. And then the unhealthy, untreatable. Therefore, no measurable goals can be set. My comments, the Asilomar Accords, copies of which both the Humane Society and the shelter have, provide standardized record keeping, and under Locke versus the County of Kern, in which there was a non-monetary judgment for the plaintiff by the Superior Court on October 25th, 2006, the court enforced all the stipulations of the Hayden Bill. The county then had to comply with all segments of 1785. To the board, I say that failure to respond to your committee, that we have asked for a new shelter, a timeline for a new shelter, is supported by the grand jury, the Hayden Bill, and your committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a...
I can offer a few comments.
we do have a response to the grand jury that is due.
We'll be bringing that in the October meeting
But
to the board. But I
how
can
will we
offer some
respond to
comments
that?
on the shelter.
Thank you.
As you know, your board included $250,000 in capital in the 08-09 budget for the shelter. We also received from Animal Services, as part of the budget request, a list of urgent capital needs. I visited the shelter myself, toured it with Sergeant Murray, and observed the deficiencies firsthand: the roof, the gutters, the HVAC, the floor, the cages. Urgent needs that should be met now. And I've discussed those with the Assistant County Administrator and asked her to go back to the Animal Services Department and get sharper numbers on the requests. They do not begin to total $250,000, but I think we've been in a position where we have let the best be the enemy of the good for a little bit longer than we should have. So my proposal has been to meet the immediate needs so that the services we are able to offer now can be done in a humane and safe environment. Second, the notion of a new facility. We have recently acquired 57 acres. We're doing the final site for the jail. I think there's certainly a consensus that the shelter would not be best located, a new shelter or an enlarged shelter would not be best located where it is now, which would ultimately be probably within sight and sound of both the jail and the courts. We've got new lease negotiations coming up with CAL FIRE, which look like they're going to yield to us the property on this side of Pope Road, which would give us a completely unencumbered parcel, and also some property on the other side of Pope Road. I think it's safe to say that the county has the land facilities available to assure the Domestic Animal Advisory Committee and Humane Society that we've got room, we've got place for a new shelter. The question is the financing of the shelter. I've discussed this with the Assistant County Administrator, what funds are available from the COP that was issued, but I must tell you frankly that it is a pretty tall hurdle for us to make at this time or next year to say we've got $3 million. The $3 million are necessary for the facility. But what we can do is put up a stake in the land and say we will have the site available for a shelter. I can't say where on the 57 or remaining or other acres where exactly it's going to go, but yes, the county has the ability to locate a shelter someplace on our site. And in the meantime, we have current needs that we're going to be working to meet.
One of the issues that Ms. Pettengill brought up seemed to imply that some communications were not up to par. I remember when we first started, when we assigned board members to different committees of the board in January, that this was not an assignment, that we haven't yet formalized our relationship, although Supervisor Callaway has volunteered and filled in admirably on an informal basis. Would it make sense to formalize that relationship and have a board member liaison for that committee?
There's a functional relationship now, and if you'd like to make it du jour, that would certainly be appropriate.
Supervisor Callaway, do you have any recommendations on that?
Well, I sent a draft letter to you all to send out. I think we need to decide if we still need a Domestic Animal Advisory Committee. We established the Domestic Animal Advisory Committee prior to it reporting to the Sheriff's Office. It was very appropriate. I know they're dealing with that issue now, and I'd be most honored to be the board representative for them, but that's going to be a discussion this board is going to have with the committee, because they are board appointed and it is a board committee.
Shall we bring this back for consideration, not just the question of formal assignment, but the relationships, I think the Sheriff's Department, the Domestic Animal Advisory Committee, and board might best have this conversation in a study context.
If that's the pleasure of the board, we can certainly arrange it.
I think that's a good idea.
All right, thank you. All right, any other comments from the public?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, before we go off...
Yes, certainly, Russ.
Before we go off this particular subject, just bear with me 1 second, Larry. I certainly want to acknowledge Dr. Paula Pattengale's participation on this Domestic Animal Advisory Committee. Dr. Pattengale is a retired doctor of veterinary medicine. You can tell that she's very passionate and also very professional about her observations. I think that it's prudent that we listen to what she says, listen carefully, and try to comply with the law. On another associated subject, Paul, I haven't had a chance to talk to the board members yet. This is an appropriate time to talk about the considerations of setting up some the study sessions, the county agencies, the study sessions on the link. I don't know whether you folks know about this body of research that establishes a very irrefutable link between abuse to animals and future abuse to family members and such. And so Paula has a young friend and a recent graduate of Red Heart High School who's gone on to studies in Washington, D.C., but her class project was the establishment of this outreach education program among the agencies of Calaveras County to make them aware of the specific ramifications of the link. And so I would hope to bring that back to keep that process going, so that we've had meetings with various members of the county staff. So anyway, it's on the horizon. You can barely see it, but it's coming. So.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Larry Cornish with Mark Twain Hospital. it's about time that I came over and gave an update on some of the things that are going on in our community relative to health care. And this morning I think I'll start out by talking about a little physician recruitment. As you all know by now, we have Dr. Tony Tran, who we recruited a couple of months ago. He's doing quite well down in the Valley Springs area. He's seen about 25, 26 patients a day. So his practice is booming from day one. So that was a good find for us and for that community, Valley Springs. Dr. Paul Wynn is with us. I think he started about 3 weeks ago. He's down in the Copper Office area at our Family Medical Center at Lake Tulloch Plaza. And his patient load is about 17 patients a day. So considering the Copper Office area and its growth potential, we're very pleased to have him down there. And he, too, will have a full practice in a very short period of time. Dr. Doug McGregor's, he's a pediatrician. He will be in our Angels Camp Family Medical Center starting October 1st. He's on his way right now from New Hampshire, and he should hit Calaveras County next week. And we're looking forward to letting our community know about Dr. McGregor and his pediatric practice in the Angels Camp Family Medical Center. And I'm sure that the community is waiting for him as well. Although we haven't signed a contract yet and she's not fully credentialed, we are recruiting another family practice physician to the Angels Camp area. This is a female family practice. She's Johns Hopkins prepared and educated. She's authored many books on health care, and we expect her to be with us shortly in the next couple of months. I'm reluctant to let you know of her name, but when she's here, you'll be the first to know. And we're very looking forward to having her on board. In the area of facility work, we are in the process of applying for a rural health clinic designation here in San Andreas. We, on our campus, have a brand new family medical center that's about 2 months away from opening. We know that there's been some issues recently with the MAC clinic up in West Point, with the MAC clinic here in San Andreas, as well as over in Jackson. So many of our residents in Calaveras County on the north side of the community are probably without care. So we're working as fast as we can to get that application through the state so that we can provide a place for those MAC people to come. Excuse me. And then down in Copperopolis and Angels Camp, of course, we're progressing with plans and permitting for our two new family medical centers in those locations, both about 13,000 square feet, both destined to open next summer. So we're real happy with the progress there. Community events. This has been a very busy summer for us, as you know. We've been doing many of our mini health fairs out in the community, including partnershiping with the Calaveras County Arts Council for the music and the park sessions, First Friday concerts in Murphy's. We've actually been doing some farmers market health fairs down in Angels Camp, and that seems to have worked out well. We've gotten a lot of community participation, and thank you for being there. And that's what community benefit's all about for a community hospital. We do have a health fair, our giant big health fair, the 10th annual health fair at the Mark Twain St. Joseph's Hospital campus is next Saturday. That's the 27th, starting at 7 o'clock. I hope to see many of you there. Blood tests, flu shots, pneumonia shots, osteoporosis checks, bone density studies, a hearing van will be there. You can come and get your blood drawn at 7 o'clock in the morning, go for a walk for our 5K fun run walk at 8:30, come back and have a Lion's pancake breakfast, and then visit the rest of the booths and activities that we have down there at the health fair. Again, that's on the 27th. We recognize that the Copperopolis area has difficulty coming to the health fair in San Andreas, so on the 24th, we are having a mini health fair at Saddle Creek. We'll be doing the same blood analysis for $30, the flu shots, the pneumonia shots, bone density study. There'll be some other healthcare related information there. So we look forward to seeing Russ and the rest of the Copperopolis crew at that mini health fair on the 24th at Saddle Creek. That's at 7 o'clock, runs till 10 o'clock. Perhaps the biggest event that we have going this year is our second annual Teddy Bear Clinic. That's when all of the kindergartners in Calaveras County have the opportunity to visit with the hospital, take a tour. The whole intent is to let them visit the hospital and understand what hospitals are all about without being intimidated by a shot or having to go to the ED because they're sick or have been injured. We look forward again to it this year. There's about 450 children who's going to be going through the 3-day event, 8 classes of kindergartners from all areas of the county, and we look forward to that, as we are all of these type of events. And finally, the last thing I wanted to let you know about is our hospital foundation is gearing up steam. They've already raised about half the money to go toward digital mammography in this community. We are on track to have a new digital mammography unit installed at the hospital within about a year, as well as having one in the Angels Camp area in about the same time frame, probably be in the new Family Medical Center that we are proposing in the Angels Camp area. And that's my report, unless you have questions.
Just one, I want to thank you for mentioning the West Point Clinic and the situation up there with the MACT. I'm hopeful that we might get together sometime soon to talk about some opportunities that might exist up there. And if you could convey to the administrator my desire to set a meeting as soon as possible for that purpose.
It was mentioned at our meeting this morning, our
Great.
Finance Committee meeting. So, yeah, we'll look forward to talking to you.
All right. Thanks
you.
a lot.
Also the SART.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, thank you for
I didn't bring
that.
up. I forgot all about that. Yeah, Sexual Assault Response Team back on the air after some hiccups along the way, but we're looking forward to have that available to the community. Thank you.
That's a big return to community service, and I want to compliment the hospital for renewing that. It's been a hole in our services here in the county for a couple of years, as you know,
Yes.
and this is a great renewal of effort.
Thank you, and thank you for all your effort.
Larry, you mentioned all these wonderful facilities that you're planning on within a year or so, but did I hear you overlook Valley Springs?
Well, Valley Springs is 2 years off.
Okay.
I'm trying to keep it, what's just on the small horizon rather than the long-range horizon. But Valley Springs is still on the books to have a family medical center there. The premier spot we feel is by the fitness center, and we're in conversation with the owner of that property and putting together the business plan and all of those due diligence steps that we have to go through. But yes, Valley Springs is still out there.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about Carmen's Restaurant? How's that doing?
Carmen's Restaurant is alive and well.
Okay, well, we so frequently work through lunch. Do they do takeout over there?
Sure, we could do a takeout for you.
Okay,
Maybe even call it in ahead of time, and we'd have it prepared so someone could swing by and pick it up. Or we'd love to have you just walk across the street and buy something. Thank you.
Yeah, we've got to spread the business around.
All right, great report. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Krista Thompson. I'm the Mental Health Services Act Coordinator for Behavioral Health Services. And I'm here this morning to announce the formation of our new Suicide Prevention Advisory Committee. And this is in part thanks to Prop 63, Mental Health Services Act funding, and the formation of the State Department of Mental Health implementation of several prevention and early intervention initiatives, including suicide prevention. So basically, in collaboration with these efforts, the state is putting together a suicide prevention strategic plan, which is attached to the press release that I have shared with you. And as part of these efforts, Calaveras is wanting to create a committee that will look at local needs and create some interim strategies to align with this strategic plan. We know that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the state of California. 9 Californians lose their lives to suicide every year. Last year in Calaveras County, 9 of our residents lost their lives to suicide. The difference for us is, unlike larger communities where the victims are often anonymous, for us here in Calaveras, the victims are often our neighbors, our friends, and our loved ones. And this cause of death is preventable. So we're inviting all of those who have been affected by suicide to join this committee and help us to identify those local needs and to identify these strategies and help us to look at how we can work with the state to eliminate this cause of death in our community. So anyone who's interested is invited to contact myself, Krista Thompson, or the Director of Behavioral Health Services, Rita Downs. We both can be reached at the main number for Behavioral Health Services, which is 754-6525. And we will, again, be looking at ways that we can address this at the local level.
Thank you. We had an earlier report from the sheriff that one of our sheriff's officers was badly injured in a crash, and he was responding code 3 to a suicide attempt at West Point at the time. So it's clear we have some issues, and I'm glad that you're taking this initiative to give people a way to respond locally.
Thank you.
Other items from the public?
Hi, I'm Cynthia Knapp from the Department of Public Works. I just wanted to give the board a small update on our annual household hazardous waste collection events. We had 3 of the 5 over the last weekend. Angels Camp was on the 13th, along with Copperopolis, and West Point was Sunday the 14th. We had a really good turnout. The participation rates were actually up in each community this year. We were thinking they might go down because there's always been a decline over years, but we had 30 additional cars this year in Angels Camp, 20 in Copper, and 10 in West Point, which is actually huge for West Point because our numbers had been dropping and dropping and dropping. I do not have total waste counts yet. The next 2 events are next weekend. Arnold is the 20th and San Andreas is the 21st. So next Tuesday you guys will get a full report. So you guys have any questions about the events in your area?
The time of these starting, Cynthia? Like the San Andreas?
The events are from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Thank you.
And San Andreas will be here at the Government Center, and Arnold is the county maintenance yard. So.
I just want to mention that I did have an inquiry about why we didn't have one of these hazardous waste drop-off points in Valley Springs.
Yeah.
And I think that the answer became very obvious, that because of the proximity to the dump location on Hunt Road, that it was kind of an unnecessary step to have it there. So
the last event in Valley Springs was held in 2002. And I believe we had 60 participants, so it was really low. We had very little tires, very little appliances, so we discontinued that event because of the cost.
okay, thank you.
Thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Any other member of the public wish to speak on items not on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Yesterday, I once again had an experience where I gained new respect for each of you. I had to attend a meeting. It was an excellent meeting. I'll come back to that in a moment. But occasionally I have days when I am very ill. And that's not a sympathy vote, it's just the way life is for me. Yesterday was one of those days, so it was a tough day to get through. However, while it helped on the way home, I was still pretty sick, and one of the hoses on my radiator blew out, so that was really nice. It was one of those days. At any rate, the meeting I went to was a training session for the Advisory Council for Area 12 Agency on Aging. And I want to comment particularly to Marita, but it was an outstanding training program. The group in Sonora put together a presentation that went from just before 9 o'clock in the morning to about 3:30 in the afternoon. It was solid, it was packed with information, and I learned a great deal about programs that are available, particularly here in Calaveras County, for the aging population that we have. And I'm going to try to put together a package of information for each of you. It might take me a few weeks to get all the materials together. But I want to provide each of you with a packet of some of the available materials that might be helpful for you when you're asked or there is an inquiry generally regarding services for the aging population. I know the gentleman from Mark Twain was just speaking, and I did want to ask him a question. Since there was a big health fair with a 5-mile walk and then there's a mini health fair, I'm wondering if there's a mini walk. I might be able to do a mini walk, but anyway, Mark Twain has been extremely supportive of the aging population here in the county, and I just want to give tremendous kudos to that organization. And also to some of the private clinics in the county. We have tremendous high-quality medical services for our people in this county. As a per-population number, we're well served, and it's just exciting to know. The clinic, for instance, you had mentioned Valley Springs, Mr. Thomas. Well, there's a private clinic in Valley Springs under Benedicto Estuesta, and that clinic is just superb also. I wanted to mention that. But I know, going back to where I started, I know that there are times when each of you have felt ill or have had other emergencies or travails, and yet you have gone to meetings, you have come to these meetings, and you've gone through these things. I know each one of you have done that. And as I started saying in the beginning, again, I gain tremendous respect for each of you. Thank you for your services.
Thank you. Last call for public comment. Anybody else? In that case, we will move to the next item on our agenda, which is item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding the adoption of an ordinance to establish regulations for activity on Tulloch Reservoir. This is the Community Development Agency, and I believe we've discussed this issue at length on 2 other occasions.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Selman, Planning Director. Yes, we have. This is the second reading of the ordinance. Staff would recommend that you waive the reading and adopt the ordinance.
Any board discussion on this topic?
Any audience discussion?
Go to the board first. Any comment from the public?
Seeing none, I would move the item.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0 vote. We now move to item 10, which is a resolution approving an application to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And this also is the Planning Department.
Mr. Chairman, again, Robert Selman. This is step 2 or 3 or 4, depending upon how you look at it, in our ongoing process of attempting to get habitat conservation plans established for our county. We obviously have a very serious issue of threatened, rare, and endangered species in this county that we are trying to cope with at this time. There are no current facilities within our county, which means if there is a need for mitigation, an applicant has 2 choices. They either do it on-site or they do off-site mitigation, which in this case would mean actually purchasing mitigation credits outside of our county. So this is our second part of this grant application. We've already received the first one. We're working on that. We're trying to find exactly where and how we could establish a habitat conservation program for our county. This is the application for that grant funding to assistance in that endeavor. So we are again requesting your board authorize the application.
All right. Any board discussion on this? Yes, Russ?
Well, I would just like to have Bob either confirm or refute this observation, but in the absence of proceeding on the implementation or the drafting and implementation of the habitat conservation procedures, Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife, all of these agencies are looking upon, currently looking at Calaveras County as saying, show us what you're going to do, and we might loosen up some of our approval processes. So I think that this is very critical that we move expeditiously on this.
Absolutely. We've been trying to work with Fish and Wildlife, trying to find some interim solutions, that is, between our actual processing of these applications and completion and acquisition or designation of a habitat conservation area. Fish and Wildlife would be more willing to work with us, seeing that we are making actual progress, and perhaps get a I don't want to say a loosening of requirements, but perhaps a little kinder and gentler view towards some of our projects. So it is something they have been most gracious to work with us. We're trying to work with them, and we believe this is a program that will serve all of our citizens.
Is there anybody from the public that wishes to address us on item 10? In that event, if there's no further board discussion or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Motion and a second. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes on a 5-0 vote. We'll now move to item 11 on the agenda. This is discussion and possible action regarding consideration of request for Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to adopt State Department of Water Resources Awareness floodplain areas into the National Flood Insurance Program, regulated floodplains.
Mr. Chairman, again, Robert Selman, Planning Director. If you'll remember, when we were dealing with our flood ordinance, we had members of FEMA come forward and suggest that there is more accurate mapping available now through the state of California, and they were actually willing to, if possible, economically provide some more assistance to the county as we implemented these new areas. This is the actual formal request to FEMA to include the state designated areas as floodplain for the county's federal FEMA Floodplain Insurance Act program. So this was rather fully discussed at our study session and our ordinance review, and if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer what I can.
All right, this has been discussed on other occasions. Are there any questions at this point? No questions. In that case, is there any comment from the public? Is there a motion from the board?
I will move this item.
Second.
Motion second. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That passes on a 5-0 vote as well. Much progress in a short time. Let's take a quick recess to be able to set up for the public hearing, which we're about to entertain under item 12. This is about the plan development permit for Norian family properties, and that will commence in 5 minutes after setup.
Of the lands that they own on both sides of this highway. So the Planning Commission, in reviewing this application, took all of the input. You have our rather voluminous packet in front of you. The one piece of data that you don't have, which we have copies of, technically is the Planning Commission resolution, but you do have the minutes, and they mirror each other, all right? The resolution is simply the form that is the adopted form of the minutes that sets forth the final conditions of the application. We have that available from the clerk's office. And then yesterday evening, which I passed out also, I received a copy of, or the letter from Katie Anderson, signed by Jonathan Flechter, I believe that's Flechter, addressing the concerns as set forth by the California Department of Transportation in their August 26, 2008 letter. I'm not going to go into very much discussion on the merits at this point. I think it's appropriate to let Caltrans provide their arguments. I would point out that Caltrans was well represented at the Planning Commission meeting. In listening to their discussions, the public and the applicants, the Commission believed that the issues had been adequately addressed, that the mitigated negative declaration was appropriate, and they'd approved both the mitigated negative declaration and the planned development permit. So with that, I'll turn it over to you and the appellant.
All right. I would ask whether Caltrans is in receipt of the September 15th letter from Flechter, because it does offer some...
They are, but only because I handed it to them just a few minutes ago.
Yes, which also is the case with the board.
Yes, I finally got this thing
This is the
just
letter
after
that
5.
you were given at the beginning of the meeting.
Just today.
Yesterday.
2 days.
2 days.
This morning, just this morning, Tom.
I think you already got it. I have additional copies if you beneficial.
I think we seem to be
And we
have enough up here.
We have a few copies here.
All right. Yes. This does also have at least one consideration. All right. I would at this time call forward the representative from Caltrans. Everybody okay over there? Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Brewer, Caltrans District 10. Some of you may know me from the TCTC board. Others, I'm a new face, and this is the first time that I'm coming before this board with any kind of an issue to my recollection. Just to give you a little background knowledge about myself, I'm a senior transportation planner with Caltrans, and I also am the supervisor for the Office of Rural Planning and Administration. I'm standing before you to represent this issue for Caltrans, for our district director, Comey G's. As you may know, Caltrans requesting a hearing before the County Board of Supervisors to appeal a Planning Commission decision to allow a plan unit development for the Valley Springs Community Shopping Center. For our appeal, we requested a copy of the Planning Department's project file. Our action will be to request the project be returned to Planning Department staff to better address the traffic impacts and mitigation. I'd like to start out basically with the end. Caltrans, I'd like to reiterate also that Caltrans is neither for nor against the project necessarily. We certainly do not see ourselves as an impediment to the project. Indeed, we see our role as helping to facilitate the community engaging in development activities and trying to implement a project that the community projects that the community would like to have. Some of the outcomes that we see at this point in time with the lead agency's approval of the studies and environmental documentation as they now stand, there are 4 potential outcomes that we're concerned with. One is that the potential exists that should there be any hiatus between project approval and the issuing of the encroachment permit being something that's issued by Caltrans, which is considered likely in the absence of a habitat conservation plan to address U.S. Fish and Wildlife comments. Should any safety or operations concerns arise due to increasing traffic congestion, the conditioning of the project with the inclusion of the existing state right-of-way may preclude or delay our taking action to address those concerns. Secondly, with the permit, the proponent will have to revise the traffic impact analysis. All of our questions have not been addressed. I have, I shouldn't say I, but the department has traffic operational engineers that have still many questions, and perhaps those are addressed by Mr. Selman's letter from Katie Anderson. Perhaps they're not. I have to consult with my traffic engineers back at the district in order to determine that. In any case, the analysis will have to be revised at this point, from our point of view, to be consistent with previous and potential follow-up comments. Along with revising the traffic impact study, the project proponent, in terms of the encroachment permit process and what Caltrans would hope would come out of this intergovernmental review and working as a partner with the county, the project proponent may need to recirculate the appropriate CEQA level document consistent with the findings and mitigation that would be proposed in the final traffic study. And lastly, given the extent of likely mitigation, there is the potential for the proponent to need to fund an expenditure authorization. Some may be familiar with that, some may not. More or less what it is a term that refers to how Caltrans funds projects. And as moving a portion of the state highway would may need to fall into that process, as the proposed permit project may exceed $1 million. And that being a key figure, because if a project on the state highway system exceeds $1 million, it is no longer a permit project. It has to fall into a different process. So that adds a little bit of complexity if that indeed is the case. $1 million or may involve complex engineering, such as a preliminary study report that may be required. This process may entail, on average, 5 years. And this goes back to our concern over the timing of getting this project implemented, the costs, and fulfilling all the needs of the process. I'd like to focus a little on the actual operational issues that we identified, and some of you, I would assume that you would be familiar with these, but as a new body, I'd like to reiterate them. The traffic impact analysis submitted by Katie Anderson on May 22, 2007 has been reviewed with comments forwarded to the county on June 16, 2007. Comments provided by the traffic engineers consider the traffic impact analysis deficient on several conditions. Although not explicitly stated in our comment, the traffic impact analysis presumes a realignment of State Route 26 as depicted in the site plan as a base condition, rather than addressing this as a baseline condition in the current highway alignment. Rather than addressing the baseline condition in the current highway alignment. As stated above, the initial study does not provide sufficient justification for essential nexus for the realignment. Several plans have been provided for a review. The retained plan sheet in the county file was developed by San Joaquin Design Group on February 8, 2007, and received by the department on March 21, 2007. This site plan was reduced to an 11 by 17 format without rescaling when attached to the initial study. The key features of the site plan are the incorporation of about 600 feet of existing State Route 26 into the development, a realignment of the same 600-foot segment to border the development, with the realigned segment having 5 lanes and 5 driveway accesses, 3 of those driveways going into the proposed development and 2 of those driveways accessing properties on the opposite side of the highway. Table 2 on page 7 of the traffic impact analysis characterizes project trip generation and employs land use code 820 for the entire development of approximately 92,000 square feet. Omitted from this is the 3,000 square foot building pad depicted in the southern corner of the development. In the table, the total trip generation, PM in and out, is 344 trips. This number is obtained by calculations contrary to the Institute of Traffic Engineers guidance using use of weighted average and represents an underestimate of about 260 trips when the proper linear regression is employed, which should produce an estimate of about 604 trips. In Caltrans' original comments, staff requested the use of LU 820 when it was apparent that on the site plan that 3 of the buildings were designated fast food restaurants and that building 1 was to be a supermarket as indicated in the project file records for March 26, 2008. Our comment was that a more accurate portrayal of trip generation could be to use the appropriate fast food and supermarket land use codes. When the supermarket land use code is used for only building 1, it generates 534 trips, which exceeds the estimate in the traffic impact analysis for the entire development by 190 trips. Combined with the fast food land use code with its 300 trips, there is a minimal underestimate of about 490 trips. Further rendering the estimation of traffic impacts in the traffic impact analysis as invalid is the fact that the cumulative future conditions were not analyzed. Although other approved developments may have yet to go in, these more likely than not analyzed in the cumulative impact of their project against existing conditions, along with all proposed and entitled projects within the area, as was known at the time. It is very likely that these other traffic studies did not include the potential traffic impacts from the proposed project and would be the basis for why we are requesting inclusion of this information in this traffic study. Omitted from the traffic impact analysis are any considerations for how the trip generation would affect locations upon State Route 26 away from the project. Taking the estimates provided by the traffic impact analysis, an estimated increase of approximately 3,400 trips, 4,000 trips daily onto a highway segment that has a daily trip generation of 12,000 gives a 25% increase in daily traffic, in which the traffic is generated in the afternoon and evening hours. It stands to reason that highway segments and intersections nearest the development would be adversely affected by this change to some degree. The intersection adjacent to the development, Hogan Dam Road, is not even discussed despite the potential for cars wanting to make left turns into the shopping center, backing up into that intersection and into the traffic lane. Other intersections likely to be affected would include State Route 26 and 12, Nobe Way and 26, Mission Ranch Parkway and 26, after the development of Mission Ranch, and Vista del Lago and 26. As a left turn queue will directly affect Hogan Dam Road as a result of this project, the appropriateness of applying fair share funds for the mitigation of this impact appears questionable. As this impact is not considered in the traffic impact analysis, and is therefore mitigation, it would not be discussed in the initial study. One should consider whether the contribution to the fair share program would be commensurate with the impact. Improvements such as a signal for the Hogan Dam Road and State Route 26 intersection are not considered in the Valley Springs benefit basin. The action to be funded is to configure the intersection with a $210,000 estimate, an action that the development Mangeli Road is to fund per the traffic impact analysis. Assuming that the configuration addresses this impact, according to the Public Works Staff Report 2004, this fee would be about $170 for each trip generated. This would yield minimal mitigation commitment of approximately $58,000 based upon the trip generation in the TIS, with a mitigation commitment of $141,000 based upon our suggested trip generation modeling. An approximate cost upon available bid records indicate that the cost for a signal at the Hogan Dam Road intersection would be roughly $350,000 in terms of 2007 dollars. If signal warrants are met at all proposed intersections, the likely cost would be in excess of $1 million. I present this information to you today in order to help to be a good partner in terms of getting a project, if it's the county's desired, implemented for the benefit of the community. Also, Caltrans, as a state agency and responsible for the state highway system, we have a responsibility towards the users of the state highway system for their safety, and also the taxpayers of California, which include the residents of Calaveras County. I'd hope that you consider the 4 potential outcomes in your decision, and I'd like to wrap it up with that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Would we want to ask questions at this point, or wait until all testimony is done and move to that? What's the board's pleasure?
Wait.
Either way. All right, we'll wait and call you back with questions we may have.
Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, did you wish to call somebody from Public Works to talk about Hogan Dam Road and other matters?
Robert Packinger would be the gentleman to speak to at this point. He is the deputy director and spoke to the Planning Commission. I believe he could help discuss that matter also.
All right. Mr. Packinger?
Good morning. With respect to Hogan Dam Road, it's true that the traffic analysis did not include any study with what was going on at that intersection. The issues there with that intersection would have to be addressed when the applicant obtains an encroachment permit from Caltrans. That intersection is also a Caltrans controlled intersection. So Caltrans has a right to request for further information regarding the impacts to that. With respect to future development of what's happening there on Hogan Dam Road, Tim McSorley from COG has diagrams indicating how that area will be developed in the future, if you wish to see anything there.
I'm sure we will. Anything else to add to this?
Well, regarding the response from Katie Anderson that we received this morning, he did not provide any analysis for the subject intersections that Caltrans requested further analysis. What they do state is that they believe that payment of the benefit basin fee is sufficient to address their responsibilities for their intersections. And that's it.
All right. I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Yes.
I think that it's timely.
Yeah,
I'd like to ask it both of Caltrans and Rob, so maybe you'd come up. And that is, the question seems to be partly anyway, if not substantially, is what authority Caltrans has when we make a requirement for that you obtain an encroachment permit from Caltrans versus what the county has to do that Caltrans does not have the authority to exercise under the encroachment permit requirement. What exactly are you requesting of the county that you cannot do by the county simply requiring, which the county does, an encroachment permit from Caltrans?
The simple answer to that, and I think everybody knows the answer to that, is that you can approve the documents as they are today, and you can direct the developer to go ahead and approach our encroachment permits office to start the process immediately.
Okay.
However, what that does is it incurs more time and money in terms of the developer's commitment to this project in order to rehash issues with the traffic impact analysis, potentially rehash issues with the CEQA documentation. And the purpose of my office, the Office of Rural Planning, as part of providing the intergovernmental review services, is an attempt to try and resolve all those issues as a partner in this project before the developer approaches our encroachment permit office. At that time, in addition to the other issues that need to be resolved on costs, the developer is now doing that with our services, in addition costing the developer another $83 an hour for our time. It is done under my office for free. I shouldn't say for free. Like all developments, it's funded under the state of California. So the short answer is that this project may be approved and may move forward. And that, to be honest, it would take it out of my office and put it in the encroachment permits office. I would just ask that you consider the other issues at stake for the developer and getting this potential highway project, which we are certainly not opposed to. I'd like to reiterate that as well. In the ground.
Are you suggesting that if this were remanded for further review within our administrative process, that whatever was worked out would waive the encroachment permit process afterwards?
No.
Not waive, but expedite or make a difference in cost?
Exactly.
And what is the difference time-wise for that in your estimation, and what is the cost difference and have you conveyed that to the proponent of the project? I must express, as a chair, some concern for what seems to be a pattern that's developing in the county. This is reminiscent of a tri-dam discussion that we had on a Lake Tulloch matter not too long ago, where we have agencies that have some jurisdiction asking us to resolve all matters before passing them on to their review. And I guess I think it's important that everybody understand exactly the implications of their actions and the options that they have. Mm-hmm. It seems complicated or complicating if the developer wishes to handle it in the other venue. Why would it be? And even if your argument is absolutely correct and in their favor, but if they reject that advice and decide that they'd rather deal with you one-on-one than in partnership in the county context, what does that mean for our process? You seem to be trying to save them from themselves. At least that's the presentation here. But we have a process, and it's gone through all the steps of it. And you have a process that is yet available. This seems to be an inter-departmental issue within Caltrans almost.
Well, if the board is implying what's the cost to Caltrans?
Yes,
it's the same. If it's
one department or the other.
Well, what happens is the intergovernmental review services that my office provides are done in consultation in the internal sense with the other office, with the encroachment permits office, as well as a traffic operational office, in order to do, I would say informally, pre-encroachment permit services. Mm-hmm. What we're hoping to do is line everything up so that once the developer approaches the encroachment permits office files the application and starts the billing, starts the charge period, everything goes as smoothly as possible. In terms of the cost to Caltrans, if we do it there, we do it there, and it's taken care of. If we do it through my office now, at this point, at this stage, and our hope is to have the issues resolved before Planning Commission, before Board of Supervisors, and we've been part of this particular process for the Calaveras, or excuse me, the Valley Springs Community Shopping Center since early 2007, if my memory recalls correctly. With that period of time, we hope to resolve these issues and have the project move forward without any additional, I shouldn't say without any additional, but to remove as much of the burden on the developer as possible for that time period.
Yes, and that was the cost I was referring to. What is the potential to that? You referenced it in letters, but I'm not clear on exactly what.
Right. How much that cost is in terms of to the developer, I can't speak to that because we're talking about identifying the concerns that we have in the traffic impact analysis, submitting the environmental documentation, and determining if that indeed is in conjunction with what's being stated as far as impacts and potential mitigations in the traffic analysis. And that's really, I believe, for the developer to determine.
But the worst case scenario, when you talk about a potential 5-year process and $83 an hour, is a fairly significant dollar figure.
Those two processes are different.
All right.
The $83 an hour is if we're talking about a simple permit project, a project that's less than $1 million.
And if it goes above that?
If it goes above $1 million, then we're talking about a potential project, what's called a project initiation document, and it moves into something in which Caltrans has to provide oversight for it. And that's not a choice. It's one or the other determined upon the value of the project we're talking about in terms of the potential mitigations. And then our process tells us what to do with it.
All right. Thank you. Other questions, Russ?
Yeah.
You want to complete? I'm sorry. I interrupted Supervisor Tryon. Go ahead.
Oh, you want me to finish?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Rob, I'm glad you're back. One of the statements you made in your brief appearance a minute ago was on the road impact mitigation fee, the RIM fee. And I just want to make sure I understand correctly how we're applying the fee, particularly in this instance. It seems to me when the board put that fee in place, we had to have a nexus for it. And we listed, a bunch of roads or intersections, et cetera, that provided a nexus to allow for a legal implementation of the road impact mitigation fee. It was my understanding that if new development came along, that it would be evaluated as though there were no RIM fee. In other words, if new development and there were no RIM fee would be required to fix X, Y, and Z intersection, then they would be required to fix X, Y, and Z intersection, and as though the RIM fee didn't exist, and then we could take the money from the RIM fee that we had allocated for those intersections and allocate them for other intersections or roads in which we do not have new development paying for those improvements. And so I'm reading just this first paragraph because that's all I've been able to get through. Probably at some point I'll ask for a quick recess where I can actually read it all. But in the first paragraph it says, and this isn't written by you, Rob, this is written by John Flecker, a transportation engineer, I believe, for the applicant. And it says, as we understand, 3 intersections, and it lists the 3, State Route 26, Hogan Dam, State Route 26, State Route 12, and State Route 26, and Vista del Lago are already in the county's road impact mitigation fee. This was noted in the traffic study, and that the project should pay their fair share to improve these intersections. It sounds like we're using the road impact mitigation fee to fix intersections, or to allow money from that fee to fix intersections that, absent that fee, new construction would be required to do. And my question is that an appropriate use of the RIM fee to basically, maybe this is too strong a word, but to subsidize new development? It seems to me as when we put this fee in place, it was with the understanding if new development came along and these were the requirements for new development to fix intersection A, and it was in the RIM fee, then we could take, new development would pay the entire cost so there were no RIM fee of fixing intersection A, and we could take the RIM fee monies then and allocate it to other unmitigated costs of new unmitigated needs where they're not mitigated by new construction and there's not foreseeable new construction. So I really want to focus on how we're using the RIM fee, and is RIM fee money in this project to do things that new construction would otherwise be required to do in its entirety, or make a greater contribution to the Valley Springs benefit basin to do it. I'm really concerned when I read that first paragraph of where we're going with the RIM fee here.
Okay. There's a combination of programs that are working in this area. There's the benefit basin and also the RIM fee program.
Okay.
The developer would be required to install the infrastructure due to the impacts from his development. Okay. But the RIM fee or benefit basin program, depending on the intersection, would reimburse him for everything that's above his fair share. So he would have to put in the infrastructure, and then he would get reimbursed for what is beyond his fair share. The calculations of fair share and all that.
Basin, but if there, put it this way, Rob, if there were no benefit basin and there were no RIM fee, the developer has to mitigate the consequences of his development. And if there are consequences on intersection A, B, and C, he would be required to mitigate intersections A, B, and C in their entirety, even though his contribution to those intersections are something less than 100% of what's cost the deficiency. Is that not true?
He would have to put that infrastructure.
When we form
yes.
a benefit basin, we do the benefit basin so that as new development occurs in the benefit basin, if you're doing more than your fair share, the benefit basin, as it develops, and the benefit basin is designed to pay upon full development 100% of the infrastructure costs of new development within that benefit basin. That's what we do when we form a benefit basin. So my question then comes to the RIM fee. Why are we using the RIM fee, if we are, as a substitute for the benefit basin, if upon build out of the benefit basin, we always design a benefit basin, so upon build out, all new construction will have paid enough in to pay for the entirety of the infrastructure costs of new construction. So I'm really concerned about where we're going with the RIM fee here. And
right.
Is there RIM fee money going to be allocated to any of the improvements of this project?
The only project that has RIM fee monies right now is the State Route 1226 intersection. That's
well,
a project
from
that
new
was
construction, and that's in the benefit basin. Why is there RIM fee money allocated to it?
The 1226 project predates, I believe that one predates the Valley Springs benefit basin. And that's something that was developed, I don't know how many years ago now that. but that was one of the original projects that has countywide.
Here comes the lawyer now.
What have I done?
Since I can't get Mr. McSorley to come up here, I'll do it. No.
No what?
No. The RIM fee funds different
Here,
types.
right into the mic,
The
Janice.
RIM fee funds different types of improvements than the benefit basin improvements.
Okay.
The RIM fee funds county-wide
Right.
improvements. So the nexus there is that all traffic in the county uses those improvements. The benefit basin improvements are based on impacts due to development in the benefit basin, primarily in Valley Springs, if I'm correct, you know this better than I do, is their left turn lanes on state highways off to the subdivisions that are approved by the county. The 1226 intersection is a RIM fee project because everybody in the county uses that intersection. So every building permit in the county is paying that fee, and that is the priority to date in the RIM fee. Do I have that right? Okay. That's correct. Okay.
Okay. So the RIM fee monies are only on the State Route 26 intersection, as far as an allocation?
No. Right now, the RIM fee priority allocation project in the RIM fee program, which includes state highway improvements and county road improvements,
right,
is that intersection. The Public Works came to you, and as I recall, they set 3 priorities at the time, and that's number 1 priority. Okay, so all the RIM fee money right now is going towards that intersection. All right, back to your question, okay? When a development comes in, we look at 2 types of impacts, direct impact and cumulative impact. The direct impact would be if the project had an impact on an intersection. For example, I'll use Mr. Norrie's project. He was required, as a condition of approval for one of his projects, the Vista del Lago, to actually fund a left turn lane at that particular intersection. But that cost of that project was more than his fair share from that project. So we created a benefit basin, put that project into the benefit basin, so that as new development comes along and is benefited by that left turn lane, they pay back to reimburse Mr. Norrie for those costs above and beyond his fair share. All right? So we are not using the RIM fee or the benefit basin fee to pay something that a project would otherwise have had paid. The traffic study identifies a project's direct impacts. That's something that that project has to pay for 100%. That's their problem, not ours. Okay. The cumulative impacts are what we use the benefit basin money and the RIM fee money to pay for, meaning that, yes, they have an impact to that particular area and improvements are necessary, but the cost of that greatly outweighs that project's impact. So instead they pay a fee, and we collect the fee until such time as we can build the project improvement. Or alternatively, a project will come along that triggers the need now, just like it did for Mr. Norrie's project, and they build the improvement, and we use those fees to reimburse the developer above their fair share. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Did I get everything right? Okay.
All right, and while people are still here, just a tangential question on this. It seems like some of the dispute here has to do with what share, when you look at the traffic study, what metrics we're using, and therefore what share of this cost accrues to the development itself. So the numbers, the question of percentage, I'm just trying to figure this out. The percentage of cost, some's going to be paid by ultimately not by the developer, but
the traffic study, I've identified the project improvements that are attributable solely to this project.
That's right, but because there's a dispute or some dispute about the metrics, whether the numbers are correct in that, it might change, that share, or the cost might change as a result if there were different metrics applied, or if there was a determination that, for instance, the Caltrans version of this would
the traffic study, they limited their focus basically on those 3 intersections or 3 driveways out to Highway 26. They haven't looked at anything beyond that to even have a calculation of what the share would be.
Well, one concern I have, and I can't possibly in my own mind reconcile this, is that one party is saying it's that a building is going to have 300 and some trips a day, and another one says it's more than, or at least double that. Doesn't that have some, as I heard Caltrans present, and as I read some of these documents, there seems to be still substantial difference of opinion as to how many trips this particular project is going to generate, and therefore wouldn't there be some impact on what, or some, wouldn't the numbers have differences of impact and how we calculate?
If I can interject, Mr. Chairman, just for a moment, just to clarify that we are speaking of two different issues. One, the issue that Bob brought up is the idea of the geographic scope, the extent of the physical project.
Yes. So how many intersections?
The generation issue that you're speaking to now.
All right.
Gosh, we got staff everywhere now.
All right, Mr. McSorley, can you weigh in on this and help?
Good morning, Tim
clarify
McSorley, and I want to answer the direct question because you talk about metrics.
Yes.
And it's really a simple matter. The metrics that I think the traffic engineer is speaking to are those that the county uses in calculating the RIM fees. It's based on a trip generation for a particular land use. What Caltrans is saying is that for them to fully analyze, they have slightly different metrics. And I believe that the traffic engineer is mixing up the two. So the calculation of the RIM fees and benefit basin fees are different from the requirements for Caltrans analysis.
So at least my confusion is honestly arrived at.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
But I thought 2 or 3 years ago we did a methodology. We established one on the trip generation that we were going to use on all projects.
We, as the county, yes, but that does not, the Caltrans requirements are different.
In retrospect, wouldn't it have made sense for us to adopt things roughly similar so we didn't have this kind of...
In retrospect, yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just so all your staff gets to weigh in on this issue. Perhaps a little bit more history would be helpful as to what Caltrans and this applicant and the county have looked at through the years. You know, we started out with the proposal of, you know, we could talk about just using the existing roadway and see where that got us. And that seemed to meet nobody's range of acceptable options. I think everybody agrees there's a problem with that road alignment as it exists, and it's going to have to get fixed substantially, and that's a very real substantially, between the two edges of this gentleman's property. That's really the only place you've got very much room to work in order to solve the alignment problems. We've met with Caltrans. I say we, quite a number of us, both county staff, the applicant, and Caltrans staff, worked and looked at quite a number of options, different speeds, different alignments. The applicant at one time proposed 5 lanes, if that's what Caltrans wanted. That's what he would put in there in order to serve this needs. And Caltrans obviously did not want that. They were very specific in saying we don't need to go that far. So, you know, at some point there is always a range. And this is not so precise a science that you can lay it out and it will never vary. So every road has a capacity. I'm assuming that this road, when it's done, is going to serve the needs of Valley Springs, both at the point of intersection and leaving both ends of this roadway. I believe Caltrans would agree with that 3 lanes is what they're proposing is the correct size. We are not talking about additional encroachments on what would be my west side of the road. They're illustrated. Those are Caltrans problems. We aren't saying that those intersections as shown there are exactly where Caltrans is going to approve them. They are illustrative. Clearly, Caltrans, through their encroachment process, will determine whether, number 1, there are 3 intersections, and number 2, whether they're going to be aligned exactly there. That is part of the subsequent design process that has to occur with every project. If this were a tentative map, you would have a similar situation, and at some point there would be final engineering done that would probably adjust these intersections slightly one way or the other. One of the issues we did look at was Hogan Dam Road, and we extensively discussed that. We had a proposal that actually had an encroachment onto Hogan Dam Road. We couldn't find a way to make that work, in all honesty. There's questions of ownership of lands. There were questions of having to cross Cosgrove Creek with yet another dam, or excuse me, another bridge structure, which creates another virtual dam across that area. We've got wetlands, we've got habitat. There are some things that this developer looked at and said, it is not reasonable or rational to go in that direction. Clearly the county is not stating there is no impact on Hogan Dam Road or other intersections. But we've been addressing those intersections for quite some time. We've already provided the funding for the 1226 intersection light. We have already required the 26 Vista del Lago intersection be signalized. And in fact, I say this not facetiously, we argued with Caltrans for in excess of a half an hour one day, trying to convince them to take the money and put the light in, and they're reluctant to do it. So we have a problem that I've got a couple of developers that are on the hook to install these signals, and I can't get the state to take the money and put the lights in. So I have a difficult time saying we need to study that intersection more. The Mission Ranch proposal is a proposal. We're to RFP now. Assuming the best of all worlds, we are doing an environmental impact report. I have no idea what that subdivision is going to be when we're done. We're looking at a year down the road. If we're saying this applicant with a proposal in hand can't move forward until someone else does their proposal, I think we're making a fundamental rule change here, and I think we need to discuss that further if that's the approach. That there are potential environmental impacts, we agree. But in our opinion, the state of California is the lead agency for those direct impacts to the state highway system. They have the full legal authority and right to demand whatever they need to make that road system work. And this applicant has said he can live with that. That's the way he wants it written. We think we've met our legal requirements to do our analysis as to potential impacts, and staff is going to stop talking now and let you go to the applicant and see what they say about it.
All right, we'll take that up. Would the original applicant, not appellant, come forward and present their issues?
Hopefully by my speaking it doesn't preclude any of my partners. I'd just like to preface what I've got to say relative to the fact that my partners have had numerous meetings with Caltrans for over 2.5 years. Mr. Brewer. Mr. Brewer has pointed out that he's been aware.
Pardon me, for the record, could you identify yourself?
Guy Myers, Valley Springs.
And while we're doing that, I believe our Deputy County Counsel came up without mentioning her name, and that was Janice Elliott, the renowned land use attorney for Calaveras County.
So I would like to give them, if there's some question about how much due diligence, how much money, how much time we've already spent dealing with Caltrans, to let them know what the project's all about. I would like to reserve them the right to specifically, if there's a question, and who was at the meetings, how many Caltrans employees, which members of the Board of Supervisors, which members of staff, if that's important to you. But I would like to just point out, in starting this, we have used due diligence in trying to be upfront with everybody, including Caltrans, what our desires are here. There is a need in our end of the county for a community shopping center with a significant credit grocery store to meet the needs of the public. We think that provided the economy gets a little better, there will be an economic benefit for us to invest in Calaveras County in that location to do that. And that's why we're doing it for our own self-interest, because we like to make a profit and feed our families just like everybody else. However, I just want to point out that Caltrans has been aware of this project for at least 2.5 years, many meetings with many employees, and my other partners can address that more clearly. I think this is a case of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Okay. Now, you guys have raised questions and made points relative to the fact that does Caltrans have the right to control what happens out there? And we acknowledge, and I think this gentleman acknowledged, except for the fact he said he'd like to do it another way to save us money. The fact of the matter is, moving that highway is, in our opinion, totally a discretionary action, getting approval of that from Caltrans. So we have one or two options in using our property. We can use it in a configuration that makes long-term sense and benefit for everybody if it's economically feasible, and we tried to be able to do that by purchasing the property across the other side, and we understand that's the discretion of Caltrans. Now, Caltrans is here today and say, whoa, you guys are acting too quickly. 2.5 years of us talking to them, this gentleman really wanted to help us and be in the loop. They've been in the loop for 2.5 years. We have a lot more engineering and updating based on whatever they want on any given day to say, well, we like this about the traffic study, we don't like this about the traffic study, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's really an issue of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. In prior meetings that I've been to and been reported to me, Caltrans, well, we really can't know exactly what you're going to do until you have some kind of approval, local approval. So this idea of we can't do anything until they do something. Some of your comments are 100% right. This board, this county has to say what we can do before we can get the necessary permits from them. By you saying that doesn't assure that they will give us the permits. We realize that. Now, enough about that, other than I think it's just simple chicken versus the egg. My interpretation of the RIM fee, and the only thing I'd like to point out about that, is the only dollars coming into the RIM fee are dollars from new development. That's where the money comes, unless there's matching state funds or something. But we're not out there currently taxing the current homeowners additional fees for future things. Now, I want to talk a little bit about CEQA, because this CEQA is thrown around like it's the gospel. Okay, the California Environmental Quality Protection Act addresses certain things, and it also specifically says certain things. And in past meetings, I've had people from the public come up and say, CEQA this, CEQA that. Now, I have copies of not only CEQA, I have copies of the CEQA guidelines, and a lot of stuff that I hear from that people of the public say from the podium, well, CEQA this, you didn't do the blah, blah, blah. I don't think in my reading of CEQA, that's not what it says to me. However, there are several things that I think we should point out about CEQA. There is a lead agency. That lead agency is the Planning Department. In 2.5 years, the Planning Department has had us do everything and then some, in my opinion, that's required by CEQA. Now, if I had my way, I wouldn't have done any of that. Okay? I think we've met all of that. In particular, and some of you that know me would agree with that. In particular, I'm a little bit offended by Caltrans not following the law. They, first of all, didn't get their comments in the time required by CEQA. Also, CEQA allows any of the affected agencies to call for a scoping session, which they have the right to do. They didn't do that. So when we're over here spending lots of money on traffic engineers, dragging your employees down there to meet with 10 or 11 Caltrans employees for over a 2.5-year period, and then at the last minute late, they come, oh, well, you're really not, addressing, and you're really, I think it's disingenuous. Okay, but enough with that. He admits that he's been aware of it 19 months. If there's some questions that it's been 2.5 years, I can get my other partners to give you more information on that. Calaveras County spent a lot of money to study the traffic impacts of future development on the main thoroughfares of Calaveras County in the RIM-FEE project. Now, I would sit here and possibly acknowledge or listen to someone if they said, well, you're taking a piece of ag property and you're rezoning it to a commercial piece of property, and at the time that we hired these expensive consultants, we didn't calculate that in, so we have an impact that is going to be more than we planned for. That's not the case. So we're not adding an additional impact from what's already been studied by the county. On top of that, some of the public testimony in the past has been, well, I live up on Hogan Dam Road, and right now I have trouble getting across the bridges with my mirrors because they're too wide, and I go down there every day to get my paper, and it's real inconvenience because I'm afraid I'll get hit out there. What does that have to do with our project? Under CEQA, the existing deficient impacts is not our responsibility to cure. Our responsibility is to be responsible and spend the money to mitigate the added impacts that we're going to have. And we have spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money to study those, to address those, and offer significant dollars and significant amounts of our property. While we're here, other than saying, hey, we'll put in a 5-lane section here so everybody can get off and count, oh no, that's too much, 3's plenty. We're also out there studying all the little critters so far that don't exist out there, but maybe someday in life they might exist, they might move another 3 or 4 miles. So we're setting aside about 9 acres of our property forever as conservation for the event that those creatures move over. So I think in the last 3 years we have addressed everything in CEQA. We have tried to step forward and do everything first class in this. And now we're at the point of saying, okay, you can do this property, you've met those, you can do this project, you've met those conditions, so long as you meet the conditions of Caltrans. And Caltrans is up here, whoa, 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 don't approve this, override this, because we're not sure what? I don't know. We want to save them the $83 an hour. Now, I could have had Jonathan Fleck come up here, and we could take this, and he could banter back and forth with this gentleman. It would cost us a lot more than the $83 an hour. So I appreciate his concern about our dollars, but the best way he can do it is quit appealing our project, come back and say, hey, this is what we need for the encroachment permit, and this is where we think your traffic report is inadequate, change this, and then we can move forward in issuing the permits. Or say, no, you know what? We don't want to take that curve out because it's too arduous a project. We're going to do that 30 years down the road when we put in the bypass, or 50 years was the testimony at the Planning Commission, and we'll do it at that time. And at that point, then we'll say, okay, we'll just use our property in the current configuration. We'll get a couple encroachments where it is and put a hardware store or a paint store or something else out there instead of a neighborhood shopping center, which we think serves the community best, serves Calaveras County best in terms of capturing our sales tax dollars that are migrating out of the county, less impacts on the overall roads because people are shopping in the county instead of driving every which way. So, thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yes, we actually do have a
Sure.
question or two. Supervisor Callaway.
I just need some kind of clarification. I want to go back to something Steve said that it crossed through my mind on Tri-Dam too. This came before us because it was a planned development, PD, and all those things that we look at. If we approve this or deny the appeal, the project applicant still has to go to Caltrans to get approval to do all the things we're discussing right now, and all of Caltrans' concerns have to be answered, either now or later.
That is correct.
Am I correct?
That is correct. Obtaining the Caltrans encroachments is a condition of approval.
So if they have to, what difference does it make? I mean, I guess this is where I'm really concerned. If Guy and his partners think it's going to be easier to deal with Caltrans without the county there, then that's an answer. The questions all have to be in the decisions have to be answered before they can move on this project. Either they go through the county or they go through Caltrans. Is that my understanding?
They're going to have to go through Caltrans even if they go through the county. If we do whatever additional studies are requested, the condition of getting the Caltrans encroachment permit will still be a condition. And for the sake of argument, if there's a slight delay between the time we approve it and they actually go back, Caltrans may ask for additional information and have to do it again. I think if you'll remember when we discussed the jail project, that was some of the discussion that we had with the board, is that
correct?
You know, there is an immediacy to their process, and they need to do it when it's ready to be built. If there's a delay, we end up having to recycle the data and do it again. So
what recourse, if we deny the appeal, what recourse does Mr. Myers and his partners have if they go to Caltrans and all the things that Mr. Brewer talked about, the Caltrans concerns, they're going to have to address? Am I correct on that?
They will have
They're just going to address it post Calaveras County.
That is correct. They will have to get their encroachment permit, whatever that means.
So will Mr. Myers and his partners have recourse to the county? I don't want to get in a position of having to then be an intermediary or saying that we've approved something, so therefore...
We are not, unless council tells me different, we are not party to that encroachment permit. We require it. It is a Caltrans process. It is beyond our scope.
Okay, so, I mean, Guy, I guess what I'm hearing you saying is let's move on, but you can't move on. Whether we take Caltrans concerns into consideration now or you deal with them
we can
yourself.
move on from the standpoint that Caltrans has a set of laws identified in the Streets and Highway Code. Okay, I think there's a misnomer. In 1939, there was the Freeway Act, was passed by the California legislatures, and then that act, it clearly identified the fact that there was a need in California in order for the highway system to move forward and transportation to move forward, that you couldn't have every state highway being accessed at wherever you wanted. So they came up with the Freeway Act. That Freeway Act said that Caltrans had the right to have certain passageways where there was no access to. Now, everything beyond that was still under the old rule that abutters, and Section 100.3 of the Streets and Highway Code points out abutters' rights. Everything else, the property owners have the right to access the highway. Now, the property owners have to get a permit from Caltrans, and the property owners have to design that and pay for that and do that in a safe manner. If we were to go out here today and we said that we want to build this and we want to use the existing thing and we're going to just throw some black patch out there, what would happen? You'd have so many rear-ended accidents that would be crazy. So Caltrans' responsibility to the motoring public and the taxpayers and the legislators is to make sure that They have the oversight so that we don't go out there and do a halfway job. Okay. Now, why we went out there and said, hey, we'll do a 5-lane section is because our past experience with Caltrans in the 1,500 feet that we've already built along Highway 26, where we took Highway 26 in front of the Chevron down there, myself and Mr. Hi-Fi, and we went from about 18 feet out there to the 53 feet, is that at that time Caltrans was saying our goal is to have a 5-lane section down through there, and we feel that each abutting side should be responsible for half of that. So when the Valley Springs subdivision was done there, we went out there, we paid, we did that. That was an impact that we did. So that's why we thought that. They said, no, we'd only like to have 3 lanes. Okay, we'll do 3 lanes. So we're willing to do what they require so that the motoring traffic can get on and off to this project safely. Even if we were stupid enough and they would issue us willy-nilly permits, which they won't, everybody getting in accidents, getting in and out of there would not be beneficial to the tenants. The tenants are intelligent enough. You're not going to have Save Mart or Safeway or Raley's go in there and invest $7, $8, $10 million in Valley Springs, and you can't get in and out of the parking lot. They're smart enough to know that and say, hey, this doesn't work. We're going to do it. So they have the ability to restrict access on 2 fronts. One, if it's a freeway. One, if it's a freeway, they have total right of access restriction. On a highway, we have to design that access that it's safe and adequate to get in and off our property. We're prepared to do that. They have a whole design criteria. They have a whole how close the encroachment can be. That's all laid out in their own paperwork.
I don't want to...
Get me any more long-winded than I already am?
Oh, you're way too long-winded, Mr. Myers. It gets back, though, to the methodology that we use for traffic analysis.
Well,
if we're saying X and they're saying Y, what will trump when it comes
let me respond to this in this letter. And let me preface this by saying we were aware of Caltrans' August 16th letter last Thursday, so that'd been what, the 9th or 10th is when we got a copy of it. So we got Jonathan responding to that right away. Now, people are making a big deal about, all this traffic, all this traffic, all this traffic. So in their analysis, first of all, when they were before the Planning Commission the first time, and the Planning Commission continued it at their request, they're saying Mr. Flecker was significantly underestimating the amount of traffic it would produce. So on page 2 of this, Mr. Fletcher has gone back and said, hey, while I think that the methodology I used the first go-round was correct, I'll use your methodology, I'll redo it. So in his initial, and I've just gotten this last night, so I've looked over this briefly, so if I misquote here. But I think basically he's saying in his first trip generation, he was saying a maximum of 344 trips on the top hour. Okay? And then I think when he went back there and redid it at their point, he came back here, and you're probably more versed with this, so if I got the numbers wrong, and he's coming back and saying at the PM maximum hour, you have 276 trips. Is that even 5 per minute? Okay, so I think this whole thing about how much traffic it's going to generate is being overblown. And let me just do a little experiment here. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the maximum cars at the peak hour. we're talking about. So whether it's 300, 270, because we're using different methodology, but the end result is, if when we come to this individual, we say we need an encroachment permit, and he comes out there and say, no, you can't have an encroachment permit because we don't think that the methodology he used when he did the original one was correct. We don't want you using that. Or when you were there on September 16th, that was the methodology we used, but you're down here at my office on September 17th, and we have a new methodology. And by the new methodology, we think there's going to be 1,000 cars a day. Guess what? We have to redo our report because we have to meet the reasonable requirements under state law, and this individual represents the agency who has the responsibility to the citizens of the state of California to make sure that we adhere to that law. So whatever the requirements are at the time, that's what we have to adhere to. Not what Guy Myers thinks would be the right way to do it, not what Jonathan Fleck thinks, not what the Planning Commission of Public Works, but what Caltrans thinks. And I submit that that is the condition that was already approved. You have to go out there and get the improvements under the criteria that this gentleman and his staff require. Just that simple.
Would you like to venture any other questions?
Yeah, I disagree with him, with Mr. Myers, but that's...
You disagree with me?
Yes, I do, Mr. Myers.
Okay.
I disagree with you, but that's not the issue before us.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, there is another question.
Well, I just had one question. Mr. Brewer, in his opening comments, he was reading from that document, I think if I heard him correctly, said that they're not even sure that there is a nexus between the uses and the realignment of the road. And that seems, did I hear that right?
Yes, Supervisor Thomas. What's pointed out in terms of the nexus is stated as, from what we can gather in the mitigated negative declaration, is due to the project itself. There is, in terms of the traffic conditions, it's in the mitigating neg deck. It states the boxes that are checked there are that there are less. It's a less than significant impact all the way down the initial questionnaire. There's nothing in there that states less than significant with mitigation, although it is alluded to in the text that accompanies that questionnaire. So that's one of the items that we have to clarify. I mean, it may be there, and we think it's there, but it needs to be brought forward in a clear manner.
Well, it's fairly easy for me to see on this representation here, of this presentation, you've got the track of the existing roadway, which is kind of like a dogleg turn. Clearly, a responsible developer, which I think that this represents, some forethought and planning, and then I have no doubt that Caltrans wasn't somehow involved in getting to this point. But if you have the ability to soften that curve, I mean, I'm having a lot of trouble reconciling that particular statement that there's no nexus between this development and the need to soften that curve or improve those streets or that particular roadway. So
we recognize that.
Okay.
You were suggesting that our documents didn't make that nexus clear enough, in your view. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's one of the issues that we may have to explore to meet CEQA on our end to accept the document. And like I said, we acknowledge that there is benefit to implementing this the mitigation portion of the project.
So in this way, at minimum, you're asking us to clarify our paths to your agency.
Exactly.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
In part, this is probably the right time to address this issue. We go around on this from time to time. California Environmental Quality Act asks you to determine where there are potentially significant impacts and through mitigation, reduce those to the level of insignificance if you're going to provide for a mitigated negative declaration or a negative declaration at all. What the law does not require you to do is mitigate what the law requires you to do. So you will find there are a number of cases where there are conditions placed on projects that are not included as mitigation measures. They are done that way because the law requires them to be done. It's not optional. You don't have a choice of whether you're going to agree to mitigate the impacts of a road from Caltrans if you need an encroachment permit. The law requires it. We've stated as a condition of project approval that you shall in fact obtain that. We don't do that as a mitigation measure because the law already clearly does require that. The same is true with a number of the things that we do. That the question of sewer and water, it's not a mitigation for the potential impacts of raw sewage on the ground. It's a requirement of code that you have an adequate sewage disposal system, so you don't mitigate what you have already covered by the act of law. So we get this question of did we adequately mitigate? The answer is we don't have to mitigate because the law specifically requires it. Caltrans, as they pointed out in the public hearing at the Planning Commission, is a responsible agency, and they have a number of legal rights as to how they deal with their portion of their approvals, and that includes additional environmental work if necessary for their portion of the project. We have to keep in focus that the county's review is a planned development. The consideration of whether or not this project should be here in some degree was made when the county did the zoning to make it C2PD. We're looking at the landscaping, the aesthetics, and the parking. That's our scope of environmental review, and clearly the encroachment is an issue relative to circulation and parking, but the applicant is on notice. If there's a significant change, he may have to bring his project back to us for further modification because we have adopted a plan that addresses the impacts we feel the project is creating within our jurisdiction. Those that Caltrans feel may be greater or lesser, they should address. And that's what we have done through the condition that they obtain the encroachment permit.
Thank you, Director Selman. Supervisor Thomas, do you have any further questions? All right.
That's all.
We'll now open this meeting to continue this public hearing by asking members of the public to step forward, identify themselves, and speak to item number 12 on our agenda.
And this is a public hearing.
This is a public hearing.
I failed to identify myself earlier, I believe. My name's Darrell Rusk. I live at 101 Melcher Lane in mailing address Valley Springs, but geographically in Burson. I am sometimes geographically challenged regarding the location of my brain, but other than that, I do okay with geography. And I find it interesting that yesterday there was a report out that California was one of the least manageable states in the United States, and it was ranked as 40th or worse in all but one of 60 categories. This developer has spent 2.5 years trying to put together a relatively straightforward, simple project. We have now spent 2.5 years and 1 hour questioning whether there is jurisdiction between A and B, and it's clear that the developer has met the requirements of jurisdiction A and now understands that there is going to be a requirement to be met separately and independently with jurisdiction B. Let's just do it. Let's start letting business do its job and be business. I read the draft impact report on Trinitas, and I'm going to go on a side for just a second, but there's a point.
That would be something
It is
off
directly,
the agenda.
what I'm going to say is directly relevant.
All right.
In that, there is a requirement for mitigation to put a turn lane at Highway 26 and Hospital Road. 2 points I want to make. One, there is no such intersection. The intersection is at Highway 26 and Weimer Road because it's not in Calaveras County, it's in San Joaquin County. That's the kind of extreme things that are going on in requirements of business in this state. And it drives me crazy, and I know it has to drive you all crazy. We go through so many hoops, so many loops, just to get a lousy shopping center that's not even that big put in an area that has a massively growing population and desperate need for additional shopping and more cost-effective shopping. So I say finish your job as jurisdiction A, let the developer go on and put it in jurisdiction B and be done with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of the public, would anybody like to step forward and address the board in this public hearing?
Good morning, Joyce Tekel. I'm here today representing MyValleySprings.com. I want to make it clear, MyValleySprings.com is not against a shopping center. This parcel is already zoned for commercial use. We are for a well-designed project as it relates to aesthetics, environmental considerations, and traffic circulation. We are for adequate and specific project mitigations, and we are for clear and legally defensible county environmental documents and conditions. We do not feel we have these here. MyValleySprings.com wrote a 9-page comment letter in June stating our many concerns with project documents and county reports. This letter is part of the project documents package and is part of our comments at this hearing. We also expressed our concerns at Planning Commission hearings. These concerns include, but are not limited to, negative impacts to traffic congestion, public safety and roads, stormwater runoff, flooding and water quality, lack of setback from Cosgrove Creek, and project encroachment into the Cosgrove Creek floodplain and floodway. If this project goes forward, an existing dangerous intersection will be worsened by adding over 3,000 daily trips. 12 acres of a 13.75-acre site adjacent to flood-prone Cosgrove Creek will be paved and roofed with impervious surfaces, and project construction and fill dirt could encroach into Cosgrove Creek and the floodplain, affecting habitat and water quality. Our concerns are not addressed in project documents, and we feel they have not been adequately responded to in the staff report or conditions. MyValleySprings.com's comments were not the only ones unaddressed. Project comments from Caltrans and U.S. Fish and Wildlife have been similarly ignored in county studies and reports. As an example, U.S. Fish and Wildlife wrote in November 2007, quote, "The proposed project would provide less than a 50-foot buffer between the proposed development and the Cosgrove Creek corridor," close quote, and, quote, "We recommend that the applicant incorporate substantial buffers." Despite these recommendations by a federal agency, there are no Cosgrove Creek buffers or setbacks specified in project documents or plans, or in the mitigated negative declaration or conditions. Clear criteria have not been set. There is only a blanket condition that the applicant consult with agencies and obtain permits. Traffic and public safety concerns have always been a high priority to MyValleySprings.com, and as you all know, to me personally. Congestion on Valley Springs area roads and highways continues to worsen over the years, with little being done that improves our situation. The roadways adjacent to the proposed shopping center, Highway 26 and Hogan Dam Road, are some of our worst for level of service and public safety. The total lack of study of existing area intersections and the lack of project-specific mitigation for the Hogan Dam Road Highway 26 intersection dismays us. This intersection has been a problem and safety concern for years. Recreational boat and RV traffic to Hogan Reservoir uses this intersection. In addition to local residents and patrons of the fitness center and Jitter's Coffee Shop, there are no left or right-hand turn lanes on Highway 26 here, which leads to traffic accidents. The existing highway LOS is D, with 11,649 daily trips, and according to the Caltrans representative, he's using 12,000 now, as reported in the recent North Vista Plaza traffic study. This is much higher than the outdated 9,000 daily trips stated in the traffic analysis. And the proposed shopping center is projected to add over 3,000 daily trips to this section. What is the proposed project mitigation? To widen and straighten the highway in front of the shopping center to 3 lanes, but then immediately bottleneck it back down before reaching the existing 2-lane intersection at the corner of the project. The plan is to leave the intersection the way it is, period, with no improvements. This is a recipe for a traffic and safety nightmare. The Valley Springs Benefit Basin Fee Program lists reconfigure the Hogan Dam Road intersection, but the county has no design for how this will be done, does not own the property needed, and has no plans to do anything about this in the near future. This is not adequate mitigation of impacts for the continued growth in the area. We need a plan for this intersection. We need turn lanes. Something needs to be done about it now, not in 15 to 20 years. Residents feel we are being ignored. Why can't the intersection be improved somehow if this project will add over 3,000 daily trips to the area? Residents and area visitors deserve better than this. We need meaningful improvements to the intersection. We need clear criteria for project mitigations and documents. Plans and conditions should provide adequate and specific project setbacks for Cosgrove Creek and should require that construction stay out of the floodway and floodplain. And some attempt should be made to reduce the footprint of the 12 acres of impervious surfaces being proposed adjacent to the creek. We realize this is a Caltrans appeal to the project approval. We would call the board's attention to our comments. Should the board approve the project, we would request the board have the planning department deal with the other aspects of the project. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. There's a question.
Joyce,
please come back.
I'll try to answer.
Thank you. There's only one issue before us today. You brought up several others, not saying valid, they're valid.
It's an effort to reintroduce it to the record. Thank you.
So
Go ahead.
would My Valley Springs, are you going to appeal the project based on our not answering some
I
of
doubt
those
that.
questions? Okay.
We're getting it on the record. It's hard to say what we do in the future. It just depends, but we're getting it on the record. That's what's important.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Tim McSorley, Mr. Chairman and Board. As you know, I'm the Executive Director of the Calaveras Council of Governments. I have some exhibits for you. I also have some for the public. Would note that these are the identical plans and exhibits that I provided during my testimony in front of the Planning Commission.
I believe these are in our. We already have these in our packet.
Just want to make sure. Thank you very much.
Oh, the whole
Yes,
set?
it's the set.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we've got them already.
Why don't you make them available to the public now?
Yeah, let's give them out there.
At your convenience.
need some more chips. I need some more chips. It's associated
That's going all the way down to Paris. Is that what
Yes, okay, everybody's got their maps, and we can proceed.
Thank you. As you know, the Calaveras Council of Governments is the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, or the RTPA, for Calaveras County. One of our roles in the community is to plan for new and protect existing roadways of regional significance. In this particular case, Highway 26 and its extension up to Highway 12 are both regionally significant in that they carry local traffic, but they're also interregionally significant in that they carry traffic from residents of the state outside of our county. I'm here today, obviously, to speak about the shopping center and its impact on, in that vein, in terms of the regionally significance. I have to take a rare instance where I disagree with Mr. Selman in terms of his comments relative to what's allowed under the PD. The staff report previously prepared by the Planning Department clearly indicates that traffic circulation is allowed to be reviewed under that PD application. One of our problems in analyzing and providing recommendations, which, by the way, we did by letter dated June 23rd to the planning part of the public record, is relative to the project description. And our review of the project is based essentially on what you see up on the wall. So I have two areas that I want to comment on relative to the project description as we understand it. The first one is the encroachment closest to Hogan Dam Road. That one actually is fairly easy, but we have two comments. Number one is either it be removed entirely, which changes part of that project description, or secondly, that it be designated as a right-in, right-out. Currently, it's designated as full operation, meaning you can turn left out onto Highway 26. However, given if it were to be designated right-in and right-out, it still may need to be relocated due to weaving motions, potential weaving motions, and merging onto the main line. So again, that may potentially, and I say potentially, significantly alter that footprint or that layout that you see in front of you. The bigger issue, however, is how this project integrates into what's known as the Valley Springs bypass. The issue or the concept of a bypass in Valley Springs is not new. It's been around for a long time. And specifically, I want to point out a number of documents. One prepared in 1999 called Valley Springs Circulation Alternatives Study. And in it shows a number of alternatives for what could be called a bypass around Valley Springs. What resulted from that study was a project study report, or PSR, that was done by Caltrans and executed in May of 2003. And in fact, those are the plans that that you have in front of you are right out of that project study report. The third important document is the Calaveras Council of Governments Regional Transportation Plan. And the bypass is clearly identified in this planning document. And in fact, when you look at the project list contained in here and the amount of work that's going on throughout the county, the bypass is all of a sudden right towards the top of the priority list. Now, that's not to say that funding is necessarily available, but in terms of the planning effort that has been going on, it does elevate its importance. The alignment, a little bit of a side note, the alignment that's shown, the new alignment that's shown, appears to comply with a Caltrans report that was done probably in the neighborhood of 15 years ago. It's called the Precise Plan Report. So this actually does a good thing in that it straightens out that curve. I don't know for a fact, but it appears to comply. However, that work was done significantly prior to any of these other documents that I've provided. So the width of the road, the width of the right-of-way, the width of the roadway are not consistent with the subsequent work that was done specifically with the PSR. I want to turn your attention to the plans out of the PSR. And again, what those do is essentially show, again, some alternatives more clearly defined than the 1999 circulation alternative study. And although it is a little bit hard to read, indicates numbers of lanes, where signals may be. For example, attachment B1, it shows the bypass is not really a bypass, but it's a widening of the facility right through downtown Valley Springs. In this particular alternative, significant right-of-way is required that would essentially remove buildings, etc. Attachment B2 is very similar. Attachment B.
The buildings you're talking about are the restaurant on the corner, the realty across the way, and the little coffee shops and other things that are on.
Certainly, the intersection would be the most severely impacted. But
I'm sorry, a little confusion on which page you're on here.
B1 and B2.
Attachment, right, the lower right-hand corner identifies which attachment I'm referring to.
Okay. And you are on?
B1. I was on B2.
All right.
About to turn to B3.
All right.
And we'll be coming back to this one because this is what we consider, and I say we, if you want to call it in-house, but with my previous experience with the County Public Works Department, I want to call this the most feasible. So we'll be coming back to this one.
All right, you're referring to B3.
B3. Attachment B4 is a slight variation of that, although it moves that primary intersection of 12 and 26 a little bit further up, and as you can see, cuts through the lower end of an existing mini storage. And then attachment B5, the intersection is shifted southerly, and you can see the main line for 12 essentially runs right through the middle of this project. So I want to go back to attachment B3. Now let me first start off with, or back up just a moment if I may, because I think there was a question about process. And for a project such as this, the process has a number of steps, and if I'm counting them properly, I think there's 6. The first step is the PSR. So we've completed that process. We've got this document in hand. The next phase of the project is what's called PA and ED, or Project Approval and Environmental Document. And in fact, the intersection of 12 and 26 in downtown is in that phase. There, as mentioned before, that intersection was determined to be the #1 priority under the RIM fee program. So there are RIM fees being utilized in that PA and ED phase. There are also CMAQ, or Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality monies, that came through the Council of Governments that we have dedicated to that project as well. So we're continuing on in the process, and that intersection is not only an interim part of the overall bypass, but it is an integral part of the final bypass project. After we leave PA and ED, we get to PS&E, or Plan Specs and Estimates, Plans, Specifications, and Estimates. Then once we have those plans and specifications in place, we can determine the right-of-way that's necessary. So we get into the right-of-way phase, and then ultimately construction, and finally closeout. So that's the sequence for this type of project. The other thing that and I'm going to ask Mr. Brewer if I'm incorrect here, but when we start talking about realigning and relinquishing state rights-of-way and accepting new rights-of-way, I believe as part of that process it needs to go to the California Transportation Commission.
In this case, it may not.
Okay. That would be good, because it does relieve us a little bit. So now I want to go back to attachment B3. Our comments dated July 23rd, or June 23rd, and actually even before that, when I was with Public Works, I had worked a little bit on this project, and we had provided these plans to the project proponent then and asked that they be considered in the design of this project. This project, as it's currently described by this layout, constrain our ability to implement this most feasible alternative. It does nothing in terms of building setbacks that comply with these dimensions on this plan. And so if the project were to move forward, if the scenario were to move forward, and we were to then move forward with the bypass or connector, whatever we want to call it, we would have to shift this project, the bypass, to the north to encumber the property currently owned by CCWD, which presents a whole other range of issues and questions, given the fact that they're using it for their spray field. And I don't know what the status is of the Corps of Engineers project that's currently, or that had been talked about, together with the dual or the multi-use recreational aspect and some wetlands mitigation and those types of things. One thing, though, that I want to, and actually I owe Mr. Myers an apology. At the Planning Commission, I was focusing on the main line and didn't focus so much on the intersection that's southerly of that main intersection that's signalized, where there's a little bit of a jog that ties back into Hogan Dam. From our perspective, that intersection could be eliminated because obviously it runs right through the middle of this project, making his project infeasible. In fact, we could take upper right-hand corner, there's an intersection of old Highway 26 and the new alignment, and we could essentially flip that down and tie into Hogan Dam which would eliminate the need for this new connection that's shown on the plan into Hogan Dam. So there are some alternatives in connecting this, the bypass, to some of the other county roads, and specifically Hogan Dam. So from an engineering standpoint, from an operations standpoint, that southerly intersection could very easily be eliminated, which again would not impact his project. So I think that tries to capture our real concerns, is that by approving it as it is, it really constrains us. It really ties our hands. The problem, if you will, is that the board has not adopted any of these alternatives as being the most feasible. So in terms of reserving the right-of-way, may prove itself to be challenging. What I would ask, though, is, and my recommendation is, that we, in fact, turn it back to Planning Department. We have a chance to really sit down with the applicant and try and come to some resolution on how we may be able to, at the very least, make sure that there is adequate setback so that when the bypass gets funded, and it will get funded, not for a few years, granted, but I think that we need to develop a circulation plan for Valley Springs. And as I mentioned a week ago, we got a $250,000 grant to help us do just that, to look at circulation down there and establish which routes by board policy are the best, the most feasible, the most advantageous, not only for the community, but for the businesses down there, such as this, so that everybody goes into the same process knowing what the rules are. As an outcome of some of these discussions, and I don't think that this has been offered, but I would suggest that perhaps if the applicant were to agree to some setback or even dedication of right-of-way, because right-of-way is a component in a project, and those costs associated with it are calculated as part of project costs, that they be given some fee credits. So I think that there's some fee credits. So I think that there's some room for discussion and some alternatives that I think the county could very easily look at as being a positive in the outcome.
I have a couple of questions on process here. The issues you're raising, I've got to assume, have come up over the last 2.5 years at some point or another.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how it is that this could have gotten to this late date without some kind of reconciliation of long-term plans for a bypass as it relates to this particular project. But secondly, I wonder what your take is on the twin possibilities. You're recommending that we remand this to the Planning Commission, but the other alternative is that this goes into a Caltrans process. Do you feel that these issues would come up and be possibly resolved in the Caltrans process? Is that within their scope?
Well, there are a couple of nuances that are involved with that, and the first one being that the project study report typically has a life to it, and quite candidly, it has exceeded that life. That's not to say that it's not a good planning document. It's just that it would need to go back and be refreshed. And then if the CTC were to adopt these as the preferred alternative, I mean, that's an action that they would have to take. So I'm actually unclear on to how that process might fall into place.
I guess I'd ask you, maybe my question in a more simple way, is there anything that you're raising that could not be included in the Caltrans process? And I'll ask this both of you and our Caltrans representative.
I'm going to refer that one back to Dan.
In terms of submitting this project, the movement of the roadway to the encroachment permits office that could be considered as part of that process.
At whose discretion, if the COG wished that to be included in the process, is that a certainty or is it a discretion of the Caltrans permitting?
Well, I just want to clarify the use of discretion. Once something hits our permits office, at that point, there's simply there is no discretion in terms of Caltrans. Discretion implies a political decision made by a body based upon the information before them. What happens at Caltrans is that we have to follow our guidelines that are presented before us in terms of our guidelines for the completion of a traffic impact study, as well as the encroachment permit process and highway design manual. Once those meet the approval of our engineers in compliance with those guidelines, then we have an obligation to allow or permit the action. So,
would your guidelines include the issues raised by Mr. McSorley? Would he have the venue through that process to have those considered? And what is his likelihood of having an ability to do that?
That I'm going to have to get clarification on.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Supervisor Thomas, I believe, has a question as well.
This question may need a legal response, but years ago when I was wearing a different hat on a planning commission, there was a similar situation down in the city of Oakdale where the Caltrans had a preferred route for a bypass that had been designated, and we had an application from a church that wanted to build a congregation right smack dab in the middle of the alignment that had been designated. And we were told at that time by legal counsel that we could not take that into consideration during our deliberations, that in the absence of Caltrans' willingness to come and buy that property, we could not give that any consideration during those deliberations. So my question is, are we at a situation like that right now?
Any comments from council?
Well, Janice, come up here, would you please? I'm not clear if this has been raised at the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I'm wondering.
And if it wasn't, is it too late to raise it now?
Janice Elliott, County Councils. Two different issues. That's with respect to the scope of the appeal. The scope of the appeal is fairly limited to the issues raised in the Caltrans letter. If you would like a specific question on the exposure related to that, I think that would be better addressed in a closed session or something confidential at this point in time. So, I mean, but I would submit to you that this particular issue and the issues raised by myvalleysprings.com are not part of the appeal, and our code simply says that if you don't raise it as part of the appeal, the issue's waived.
Thank you. That was my impression. It's either waived or the decision by the Planning Commission on this issue is final. Either way, I think, I think the question's answered.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out whether this falls within what Mr. McSorley's issues fall within the scope of the appeal or not.
I think the answer to the question is no.
Okay, well, let me just take this one step further. We've heard discussions both by Mr. Myers and some acknowledgement on the part of Mr. Brewer about the option of 5 lanes of roadway versus 3 lanes of roadway. I mean, I won't have an opportunity to be in your meetings when you go through your deliberations, but I would really make a fervent request here that based on Mr. McSorley's assertion that this option 3B would likely be the most appropriate or the most usable alignment, that it seems to me that would predispose this project to being approved, the roadway improvements out there, at a wider road profile, wider than 3 lanes, because if this does happen at some time in the future, it will require more than 3 lanes. So if they, as Mr. Meyer said early on, that they had no objections to making it 5 lanes, it was only because of the Caltrans suggestions that they didn't want or need wider than 3 lanes that it became 3. Since you're going to have future discussions on that, please make that part of the analysis. I don't think, I haven't had a chance to talk specifically with Mr. Myers about this, but I don't think that it is their intent to develop here and foreclose any or all of these alignments. I think that their stated purpose here is to do something that is beneficial to the community from the standpoint of shopping opportunities, and from what I've seen, they have not presented any obstacles to any of these future developments. I'm sure that they would probably sell the property if Caltrans wanted to buy it for this proposed development. So anyway, I'm just rambling on here, but I want to throw out these options.
Supervisor Thomas, the difficulty that I have in ascertaining that is the real lack of clarity as to what that right-of-way is that they're proposing. And if you look at again at the plan, coming out is...
Are you talking about this right-of-way or this one?
I don't know. Highway 26, the latter. And right where your hand was, the way that the right-of-way appears to taper down precludes a even curvature of that right-of-way. So I don't have that definition. I can't answer that question of what those dimensions are and what...
Well, that's why I brought up the history, as I've seen it unfold here today, is that they were proposing the option of having a wider alignment here, and they were told no.
Can I interject here just a second?
Actually, Supervisor Thomas has the floor at the moment, and you can speak, but after he is done with his colloquy with staff.
Is that a colloquy? Is that what it was?
That's what it was.
And or mine.
Okay.
What's this? And or mine. Mine as
yes,
well.
and Bill's as well.
I am well aware that we have certain things that are available for us to make a decision on today, and just in the interest of fleshing future options out, I'm kind of, as Joyce said, kind of introducing these ideas into the record. I have no expectation that they'll be, followed to the letter or anything. I'm just making conversation, but I think it's worthwhile to talk about.
Can I address Supervisor Thomas?
Yes,
directly?
yes, I was expecting that you would.
And I'm speaking without the benefit of legal counsel, and perhaps county counsel can provide some guidance to myself on this issue.
Only if you pay him.
My understanding, and perhaps incorrectly so, is that if the Board of Supervisors approves the project and approves the site plan, that de facto conditions us to what's on the site plan in terms of the roadway.
You need to look at them. I'm staying out of the
And I
California legal affairs.
I can't see what's on that site plan in terms of the number of lanes.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, may I address that specifically? Because we talked about that specifically.
Yes, go ahead.
That is a proposed site plan that is conditioned upon the approval of Caltrans as well as a number of other agencies, including Fish and Wildlife. And the applicant was placed on clear notice that the ultimate design of that highway will prescribe the need to review the alignment of parking, driveways, and so on in the interior if it changes in any significant way. This does not preclude in any way Caltrans from doing whatever it is they need to do to issue their encroachment permits.
Including number of lanes, different sites for access.
That is strictly their call.
Yes.
We're looking at the potential only of having a commercial development within the private property. And the applicant has to make his peace with Caltrans and all the other agencies, and then if it still looks like as approved by the commission, then we're going to sign off building permits to let it be built.
And if it's substantially different?
If it's substantially different, we're going to take it back to the Planning Commission for another review. That's clearly stated in both the Planning Commission and now in your records, so they have to live with that.
Well, all right. Now,
I appreciate that clarification.
Mr. Myers, please step forward to the podium, reintroduce yourself, and speak your mind.
Guy Myers, Valley Springs. I just want to point out one little detail that this board isn't aware of and maybe clarify. We had in the past retained Ted Pedersen, ex-planning director, who has another practice, private engineering practice. Plans as far as the alignment have been submitted to Caltrans. We originally suggested taking the speed down to 35 miles an hour. Caltrans came back, no, we want the alignment like this. So Caltrans has in their files the engineering that they could share with Mr. Twirly, or we'd be happy to give him a copy. So it's defined what they've already suggested the alignment be in this 2.5 years. That's all I wanted to clarify, because there is documentation, engineering that they have basically. I wouldn't want to use the term approved, but they have suggested that this is what they're more comfortable with.
Okay, thank you. And please step forward and introduce yourself.
My name is Roy Hi-Fi. I'm one of the owners. In a planning, Tim was saying that this bypass in conservative time is going to be 15 to 20 years. That's conservative time. If he's suggesting we hold our project for 15, 20 years so they can put the bypass, we are willing to sell it to them, and then they can do anything they want. But, this thing came up, they know it for 2.5 years. The only time we heard about this, it was at the last planning commission. This popped out. They knew about this for 2.5 years. They didn't come up. So I don't know what they're suggesting, if we should hold this thing, or I don't know what they're trying to do.
I might try to interpret it as their suggestion that we do nothing to preclude what they perceive as their most feasible option, and that we try to make sure that each project that comes up takes into account long-term implications for getting around this town. We don't want to be another Sonora. We want to make sure that there's a way through or around, and that's.
We're willing to give them any kind of easement, but we need to have that set up. But we already talked about giving easement on the 26. We want to do 5 lane. They want 3 lane. We have a lot more room. So I don't know. We try to work with everybody and spend thousands of dollars with the engineer, with everybody. And it's absurd. Some people come in here and they say about drainage. What do I know about drainage? That's why we hired this engineer to see what kind of drainage we need. And everything that is required by the county be done. By them suggesting that the county didn't do their job is crazy. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. Would anybody else like to speak? Yes, thank you. We are recognizing in the moment that we will be working through lunch, so we'll be ordering. That's the paper going across our desks. And please identify yourself, sir.
Is that coming from the hospital?
Yes, my name is J.D. Fry. I'm concerned about the project. I have property across Hogan Dam Road that is also in the right-of-way, proposal right-of-way of the bypass. This project moving forward is encouraged us to do more with our project in the near future. The development of housing has fell apart in the county in the last 2 years, and I'm an engineering contractor for 33 years in the county. Never stepped forward before. Felt it was time to do so we can keep at least the development of commercial property keep going in this county. If we don't do something, the county's going to be under, and so is everybody else. So I just want to let you know that on the paper I passed around, the pink is the project in question. The yellow is the property my associate and I own. So we're writing basically in the quarter of what the Caltrans wants to do and what the bypass is going to do if it goes that route. So I need to know, like Myers and everybody else, what we're going to do with it so we can plan our future and our projects. That's all I have to say.
All right. It's interesting, the narrow scope of this particular appeal, but how many other things would appear to be attached to it that are unanswered and outside the scope of our moment here. It's a little bit troublesome.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, we would say they were answered, and they were not subsequently appealed, so those questions have been foreclosed.
I understand the moment. Thank you. Any other presentations? All right, we will close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, I know we've talked to you about this before. If you all know that we always live with the Supreme Court and you know, the tests of Nolan and Dolan, proportionality and nexus. The state of California runs, I suppose it's debatable in some people's system, a very excellent highway system or a good highway system, but they are responsible for their system. It is outside of our direct control. In this case, we are looking at what is truly a very minor review of the design of the layout of some buildings and the internal circulation for parking and the landscaping. Obviously, there are issues of drainage and other issues, all of which have been addressed conditionally through the Planning Commission process. We have traditionally set requirements for all of our projects of meet Caltrans requirements. It's get an encroachment permit, or if they specify exactly what they would like in terms of an actual design, we set that. But then it is always up to that agency to complete their processing, and to the extent they do, grant those encroachments. That, in staff's opinion, really is the way this particular project, like all of our other projects, should be treated. Caltrans has the legal authority to make whatever decision they want to on this project. Should they decide that in looking at all of the information and all of the issues, they need further environmental review, further traffic studies, whatever else, they are a legal representative of the government. They have exactly the same rights you do relative to their special areas of expertise, and they can require of the developer whatever it is they need to consider their project. I suppose the converse is true also. Were they to look at all of the information that's provided and decide, you know, we really do have enough to make our decision, we're going to go forward based on the record as it exists, that's ultimately their choice as well. What we need to do is let them have an opportunity to make their choice. And we believe that's exactly what the Planning Commission intended when they approved this project conditionally. They didn't give it an outright approval that was unfettered. The resolution and the Planning Commission minutes set forth the conditions that are a prerequisite to developing this project, and they believe that the county's level of environmental review was appropriate for this project. What Caltrans may have to do, that's up to Caltrans. But it is their legal authority and their legal choice, and their representative quite clearly pointed out that to the Planning Commission. They are a responsible agency. They have legal rights. Staff felt and the Commission felt that they should be allowed to exercise them.
I have a question, Mr. Sell.
Certainly.
I understood you very clearly, but their purview isn't to, and I understand time's passed, but till when we look at cumulative and we look at, well, there's this project and then there's going to be another and there's this vacant land and the gentleman that just came up, and we need to look long-term, 30, 40 years, and look at a bypass. That's not Caltrans' purview then. That's our problem. I mean, we know what's out there. We make the land use decisions. We do the zoning, and we determine that at some point in time, we're going to need a bypass. Or so how does that fit in if they go project specific?
Well, again, I would remind the board that what we are talking about is the state highway system, not the county road system. The cumulative impacts are both of our responsibilities. It's Caltrans' responsibility as well as the county's. The county is addressing those through a series of different conditional approvals, including the direct improvements required, the requirement of paying the county's RIM fees, the requirement of paying the Valley Springs benefit basin fees. The design of the project itself is considered in many ways a mitigation for the traffic that is being generated from this particular area of the county, both in and out. You know, there are lots of ways of looking at this, but again, the proportionality portion of the discussion is not designing a community plan. It is not rezoning the area to provide for new developments. It's to determine whether the design and functionality of the internal operations are sufficient, and leaving to Caltrans, in this case, that which is Caltrans. And that's why the Commission did a review to determine there was a reasonable amount of environmental review for the county's concerns, and if Caltrans needed to do something beyond that, they should be allowed to do so.
I understood that part. That wasn't. We'll have a sidebar. Thank you.
All right.
That's all I have.
Everything's set. All right. We'll now move to board consideration, and we'll start with the supervisor whose district brings this forward, Supervisor Claudina.
Lucky me. It's been a little difficult for the past almost 3 hours to keep track of where we're going here for me. But getting back to the issue as described on the agenda for consideration of this appeal from Caltrans with regard to the highway issue here, to be honest with you folks, I could not agree more with our staff. I cannot support this appeal, and I'll just get that right out front before I begin here. The reason being has been explained and macerated here for the past 2.5 hours, but the most recent statements of our planning director, Bob Selman, speak to my point of view here. This is a state highway project, of course. In reading the documents, many of these documents, and it seems to me that there are some relatively minor procedural details that, in my opinion, the developer should be able to work out these small differences with Caltrans. I've used this statement before, and I don't mean it to be disrespectful to any faction here, but we often tend to, in my opinion, mountain climb over molehills. I don't think the County of Calaveras should be forced into the role of being the agent for developers, applicants, or whomever with other agencies. The developer has spent considerable time, effort, and funds, resources of all sorts to come to this point after 2.5 years. They're at the point now where they need to work out some differences with Caltrans, and I think we should allow them to do that. We don't want to be the agent of obstruction here. At least I don't want to be the agent of obstruction. When it comes to the issue of the methodology, Calaveras County has determined their methodology for doing these traffic studies. We discussed that a little bit earlier today, and we have that. Perhaps it is not identical to what Caltrans does or what somebody else may do or some other county. It would be a very difficult task to stay exactly in step with any other agency, but we studied that to the point where we came to a conclusion about how we would determine the methodology for our studies in that nature. And that is what we tell applicants, developers, et cetera, that they have to comply with. And I believe in this case, this applicant has done that. Now, if there are some procedural differences or some technical arguments here, in my opinion, that is between the developer and Caltrans to work out, which I believe they can. They've already started. The letter that we received this morning, dated yesterday, from Katie Anderson and Associates talks about in there, they have made some considerations, they have made some modifications, they have altered their original and their revised project trip generation, and I believe these discussions should be between the developer and Caltrans. Again, this is a state highway project. The argument about the bypass, and these are all valid points that people are bringing up. However, you have to rely just a little bit on history. I shouldn't say you, I have to rely a little bit on history. I can recall myself looking at plans, having large pieces of paper spread out on the desk at the, actually the local traffic commission at that time is what we used, and they met in the old courthouse in Angels Camp. Any of you can remember when there was a courthouse in Angels Camp? Not very many of you. Well, I can tell you there were plans spread out over the table, decisions trying to be made at that time exactly where the Highway 4 bypass would go. Let me tell you, they're building it right now. What they're building now was not on any of those plans. Almost 40 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, but close to 40 years ago, I recall the plans to realign the entire Highway 26 from the West County line to Valley Springs. As a matter of fact, efforts were made, and although I didn't see the documents, was advised that right-of-way acquisition was in process. That never happened. Those right-of-ways are gone. Now I'm hoping that we've come a little ways from there and that the bypass will go through, but if I understand correctly, and somebody needs to correct me, of course, if I'm wrong, there has not been an absolute decision made among the various alternatives to do the bypass or the byway or whatever you want to call it, is going to lead from Highway 26 to East Highway 12, east of Valley Springs. So that hasn't been decided, and if that hasn't been decided, neither has the right-of-way acquisition been initiated, and hopefully that will happen in a few years. But if it's anything like history, my money would be more on what Mr. Hi-Fi has to say, 10 or 15 years. If that is what it's going to take to allow a project to be built on a state highway, we may as well close our doors right now. Again, I don't believe we need to be the applicant's agent in acquiring these permits. I think that we can probably, and maybe we have already, I think we can study this. We can study this into the next dimension. But for 2.5 years, this applicant has gone along with what the county has asked them to do. I have attended several meetings myself. Every single meeting that I have attended with with this applicant and staff, they have asked, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? What do we need to do? And when told, they have done that. They're at the point now where they have satisfied Calaveras County. There are other agencies and there are other considerations. I believe they should be allowed to go forward and deal with Caltrans, deal with any other federal or state agency that is going to come to bear on this project. But we can postpone this and we can study this until no one will ever feel like developing or having a project in Calaveras County. And so I have to state that my opinion is to deny the appeal and to allow this applicant, this developer, to go forward and deal with Caltrans.
Thank you. Supervisor Callaway?
I think Bill pretty much said it all. When I go back to really what the issue is before us, I also have to deny the appeal. I have some real trepidations about it, but it's outside the scope of what is before us. If this was getting a permit from Tri-Dam Fish and Game Commission, it's the same thing. And I don't know that we've been consistent, though, in our application of these things. I have a concern about that. I have a concern about why we have this huge traffic study if we just, that reaches outside the boundaries of the project that's on the state highway, if we have no control over something like that. And why are we dealing with all this if that's not something in our purview? So just to cut to the chase, I'll support Bill on this issue.
Thank you. Supervisor Thomas?
I'll just make it brief, Mr. Chairman. I feel the same way. I'll be voting to deny the appeal.
Supervisor Tryon.
I guess my concerns are a little greater than the others. I don't mind saying, you know, on the Caltrans issues to go back and get go through the encroachment process, but I have a very hard time thinking that it's appropriate to cut off the only or terminate basically by an action here today, if this action would do so, and I think that's in question, but to terminate what I would consider probably to be about the only viable bypass Valley Springs. You know, I don't think we've had a deep enough discussion or a thorough enough discussion to take a vote today, in my opinion, that would terminate or could have the practicality of terminating any viable bypass of Valley Springs. Now, I don't know if it does that, and I'd like to know that. I'd like to the gentleman, we have in the record that both Public Works and the COG have not seen some of the maps to determine whether the viability of the most probable route would be in jeopardy. And I guess before I would be willing to vote to deny the appeal, I would like to know, I'd like both Public Works and COG to have all of the engineering to know exactly what the impact would be on that alternative. Because you do away with that alternative, and I mean, one of the reasons, you know, and Bill's comments about the Highway 4 bypass, two things. That was always when Bill looked at it, a Highway 4 and 49 bypass, and then it was broken in half. But secondly, what we end up with in the future is basically how to get around, because we don't defend a route, then, you know, it keeps changing. And the costs keep going up, and we don't know quite what we're doing. I mean, now's the time, it seems to me, to hold to what the preferred route would be. And so I'm not willing to vote today to deny the appeal because I would like a 2-week extension, and I'd like to have a lot more information on the impacts on the preferred route for a Highway 1226 bypass of Valley Springs. I cannot in good conscience say I'm going to vote to kill the most viable route, and quite frankly what tends to happen if you don't take the most viable route now and preserve that right away, you know, the whole question of a bypass starts to come into play, particularly on that end of town. Maybe you can do it on the north end of town instead of the south end of town, but then that creates a whole other set of circumstances. So I would like to know if we can't do something that's reasonable with the developer to mitigate, if mitigation is necessary, to protect the preferred bypass alternative before I'm willing to take a vote. So that's my comment.
That is what my concern is. I mean, do we keep allowing growth, this project, this whatever, to go without dealing with this? And what I heard you say was that's a Caltrans problem. I think it's a county problem. So I'm not going to go as far as Supervisor Tryon, but I just wanted to say that is what I was trying to get across.
Supervisor Pladino.
I think the concerns that Supervisor Tryon brought forward just now are valid. They are valid. But how long are you going to wait to allow any development to occur? If I understood correctly, the PSR here has expired. The route has not actually been identified for the record. The route at one time did include CCWD's property as far as a a suggestion or feasibility. There were talks with them. We don't know who is going to own the property that we are now looking at as possibly the preferred route. That requires more study. It requires more negotiation. We don't know if there's going to be a huge development that goes in out there or not. That is also going to be a Caltrans element when it comes to bear to intersecting both Highway 26 and Highway 12 east of Valley Springs. And so while these are concerns, I don't believe they are concerns that won't be dealt with at the time, is what I'm trying to say. Perhaps a better example, Tom's right about the Highway 4 and 49 bypasses 40 years ago. However, my other example of Highway 26 was a valid project at one time. There was time spent on study and right-of-way acquisition and so on. And I'm not saying that the same thing will happen with this project, but that didn't come to fruition, and that's been decades ago. So at this point, if we are going to say we're not going to allow any development because we might have a bypass and it might go where option B3 is, then we're going to wait to find out if that's going to happen before we approve any other designs. That's not sane.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying you have to wait till it's approved. I'm saying, why can't we put it off for 2 weeks and let the developer and Public Works and the COG take a look at the final plans and see how they may impact something, and see if there's some simple mitigation to resolve it prior to denying the appeal.
If I thought that was possible, Tom, I might agree to it, but I don't believe it's possible. We've had 2.5 years of this, and there is nothing in the record that would make me believe for a moment that could be resolved in 2 weeks.
So it depends what the impacts are. I don't think we know the impacts, but there was something presented in the record saying that there was some engineering done, of which apparently the COG and Public Works has not reviewed, that would answer that question.
Well, I just don't believe that they would resolve it in 2.5 weeks. That's just how I feel about it.
Okay.
I guess it's my turn, and I'll, in as much as it appears we already have a decision, I would like to make comments sort of on the margins of this. I have a number of concerns that aren't really relevant to the decision today, but it has a lot to do with how we got here. I worry, for instance, that our metrics for state highway projects are different than Caltrans, because I think it leads people into one discussion with some presumptions and then leads them into a second process that could conceivably take a great deal more time and money. And it's this, I don't think applicants appreciate duplicative processes, especially when they contradict each other. So I would think that we have some work to do on on that, at least as regards state highways. I think we invite people to conflict when we don't reconcile these things. Secondly, I'm worried about what I'm seeing now as a pattern, that we have lead agencies, and apparently we are the lead agency for land use, but there are often other agencies that claim lead over some other portion of the work. And I would assume that our job generally is to try to reconcile things before they come to this level, but that we are seeming to have some instances recently that haven't accomplished that. And once again, we have a second process that puts many things up for grabs. But interestingly enough, not always the things that are most important. For me, the idea of Valley Springs gradually shutting down its options for how to get through it makes no sense. It's the same kind of sense that was applied in Sonora, where now people wait for a very long time in the morning, at noon, and in the afternoon, because Highway 49 just doesn't get them through town, except to go through the intersections that have gradually clogged to the point of almost big city, anger management challenges. I think it helps us to plan ahead, and it helps us to have a good plan ahead of time so that each development coming forward can know what our thinking is. We should know that, should have known, and we did know long ago, that Valley Springs was going to be a commercial center and a place for business as well as residences, and that it was going to grow to the point where our roads couldn't handle it. I would have liked to give Mr. Myers and the subsequent people who are sitting here in waiting much clearer indications of our intent on where we want to and how we want to get around Valley Springs. And I appreciate groups that are challenging us to get that resolved, and I would hope we would, separate from this process, make ourselves much more clearer in the close to immediate future. A couple of other things that are not relevant to this proceeding but that are of concern to me is that we keep on talking about where the floodplain is and what we and how we relate to it. And most recently, I guess earlier today, we just agreed we'd accept $1 million to add some new reviews and take a look at updating our assessment of where the floodplain is. And I worry that that's going to happen after we've committed to something that's maybe in, maybe out, and maybe it's out of what we currently think of as the floodplain, but maybe it's in what may come to be our view of the floodplain. And finally, I guess a gratuitous remark on choices of food. I believe in this county that our kids and many adults need more fast food places like a fish needs a bicycle, and I keep hoping that we'll not become the kind of mecca for that.
Does a fish need a bicycle?
No, well, no, and we don't need, well, anyway. All of which is irrelevant, and I will be casting my vote with the majority here. I would actually be casting a vote with Supervisor Tryon on the question of 2 more weeks to at least know the answer to this critical question, except that I don't find it to be within the scope of our decision today. I think his sentiments are correct, that these are big issues. I can only hope that the agencies responsible for this, which I take to be our planning department, our public works department, the COG, and Caltrans, will help guide us through this in a coordinated and timely fashion. That said, I will support the denial of the appeal. So, do I hear a motion on this?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
We have a 4-1 vote. I appreciate people's patience, and I really do hope we can throw a more clear look at future applicants in the future so that we don't create these kinds of ambiguities.
Steve, the comments you know about the methodology?
Yes, we will now take a 5-minute recess and resume for board correspondence.
That means that every city and county would have to
continue our a little bit. Sorry. That's okay. There were many among you not present.
What is this now? Is this a new handout?
This is a new handout. I think it involves correspondence, and to discuss that, we'll get to the supervisor. But we will start today. We'll start today if he can muster the moment with Supervisor Tryon on correspondence and other items.
I do not have anything to bring before the board today.
Thank you.
Is it next week? I'll bring it up next week. I don't know if it's after next Tuesday.
Okay, Supervisor Claudino.
I have only tomorrow morning at the Calaveras County Water District office at 10 a.m. There's a Calaveras Amador McCollum River Authority meeting. Not that they have any. That's all.
Thank you. Supervisor Callaway.
I have, I'm sort of in shock at the moment. I'm going with the sheriff's office to Oakland on Thursday for the AB 900. Dennis just came in and said that there's a trailer in the budget that would in all essence kill AB 900 because they added some prison reform and would kill AB 900.
That's in the. Okay, what's exactly
AB 900's the money for the jails, for local jails, and so in the budget, I mean, maybe Bob knows more, and the governor said he's going to veto the budget. It's not just because of AB 900, which gives us our $10 million, of which we were hoping on Thursday we would get the other $17 million. So I mean, this is
we just
a joke.
We just did all this.
This is just, it's very upsetting, and I guess all the sheriffs in the state of California are talking to their legislators about, and even Calaveras has a lot of support from sheriffs throughout California on, as you all know, we were the poster child. Anyway, I'm just in shock. So, Bob, if you want to add on to that, you know probably more than I do.
Actually, I don't have I was going to give a little budget roundup when the arrow came around my way. If you want me to address
That's
it,
fine.
then
That's fine. And then I have the Visitors Bureau, if depending on what happens Thursday, if there's even a Thursday, the Visitors Bureau, just for everyone's information, is having their last event at Quincera, the B&B, Tom. That's at 5:30.
That's Wednesday?
That's Thursday at 5:30. On Friday, I will be at the State Water Plant in Sacramento all day. That's all I have.
Supervisor Thomas.
Okay. As far as significant events this week, I just want to acknowledge that it's my wife's birthday today, so I've got to take her out to dinner and that kind of stuff. So that's very big news. The other thing that I placed in front of you is, I guess I could classify this as a bit of housekeeping. Those of us in Copperopolis that have been trying to chase this idea about putting a road in across through Tom's district over there with an alignment that would go out the road to Cam and then extend to a cove on the west side of New Maloney's. The Bureau of Reclamation is currently, as you all know, in the process of revising their resource management plans and their environmental impact statements that will accompany that plan. There is a significant threshold of response time that ends on Friday the 19th, that in order to keep our foot in the door, we have to get a letter filed with them that will sort of be a placeholder to more or less force them to give some consideration or continued consideration to this concept of improving some facilities on the other side of the reservoir. I went to a meeting over at the Columbia College 2 weeks ago where I met with the area manager for the Bureau of Reclamation, a gentleman named Michael R. Finnegan, and he was very helpful from the standpoint of laying this out and specifying that we need to get this letter filed, that it doesn't put any responsibilities on us, but it moreover states, as this is specifically created to fulfill the directions that he gave me that night. Is we put these things on the record, and then essentially saddles them with the responsibility of doing the environmental impacts of the additional road traffic that it would create, the additional impacts on that side of the reservoir for expanding that area for recreational uses. What we're asking in this letter, you'll see that the bottom bullet there talks about we're expecting that these impacts on the other side will be essentially the same as concurrently associated with those at the Glory Hole recreation area, namely that we would hope to have some restrooms, we'd have some day use areas, we have some equestrian trails associated with that. So I want to emphasize that this doesn't create any instantaneous responsibilities for the county. It's just procedurally that it needs to be done. And
I had one question. I think Marita has a question as well. On the question of developer fees, do they have the authority to do those, or is that ours to implement?
Where do you see that one?
It's on bullet third from the bottom.
Well, where that is, where that's coming from is the discussions that we're having in the Copperopolis, or within the Copperopolis Community Plan, is that future development, if we can get this moved forward and get the certain tenets of the Copperopolis Community Plan adopted, where we would expand the boundaries of the plan out to show that the road would go there, that we could fairly quickly start capturing $1,000 or $1,500 per new approved set of plans in that area. The developers all seem to be willing to pass that on to future buyers down there in exchange for the expectation that it'll offload Lake Tulloch, and it will also be a very desirable and, for the want of a better word, a saleable amenity for future buyers in that area, that they would have the opportunity to put themselves and their toys in close proximity to a 12,000-acre lake and 3,000 acres of equestrian and walking trails and you know, everything that the Maloney's project was supposed to be, with their plan that they floated back in 1976. This is, to our way of thinking, this is an excellent way to fulfill that potential that we were all sold on back so many years ago.
And these then would be just Copperopolis developers?
Yes.
Other questions, Marita?
No, but I have in my usual fashion one more comment tonight.
Okay. Well, I was going to poll the board on the.
Let's finish this.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, before you go to the board, I had discussed this with Supervisor Thomas. I think in the what your administration would ask is that if there's a poll, that it be to authorize the chair to send a letter that addresses each of these salient parts of each of these points.
But that we rewrite it.
But that we, because I've circulated this to County Council, Public Works, and CDA. I wanted to make sure, and CDA has verified, that there's nothing here that's a significant variance with any position the board has previously taken. But I just want to be sure that we have the wordsmithing necessary to have the right impact and preserve our options. So that's the only thing before you take it back to the board.
And of course the chair reserves minor editorial rights in
it would be your signature
passive
after all.
versus active voice, etc. So. That all right with you?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. All right. So that is the condition of this poll. You're supportive, Marita?
I'm having a problem with doing a poll and putting something out where it's a developer fee, even though it's copper, without having it agendized in a. I mean, I like the idea of the concept of. That's all great, but that we propose a developer fee, I just get a little nervous when we do
evaluate
that.
the need
How
for
about
it.
how about explore the possible implementation of a...
You could, I mean, this is going to New Maloney's. You could just leave that bullet point out. That's up to us to figure out how to fund it.
The important thing is to communicate to the Bureau of Reclamation is that we are not expecting them to fund this
Why don't you
road.
say that without saying how we propose to fund it?
Well, but why shouldn't they? That was, as you said,
It's-
going back
it's-
to they agreed to a whole host of things.
Because they'll never get funding out of Congress. with the
It's
budget.
dead on arrival.
I mean, there's just no way.
Okay.
If there's a local solution, we should certainly pursue it, but,
I mean, if
but
you-
we can't commit ourselves to that without...
I mean, if you want to put something like that in, why don't
discussion.
you just basically say, you know, the road will be funded from
The
local
county will
fees.
pursue
We'll
local
pursue
funding.
Local funding for the road. Just say that, so you don't get a huge turnout about what the hell we're doing before we really can even get a commitment on anything.
That was going to be our concern.
Yeah.
Well,
That's fine.
you've heard the discussion, and I'm sure staff will add appropriately.
Yeah.
Any heartburn on that particular?
Having said that, I think that we can get the funding locally. That still is not going to prevent me and others of us, if we want to go and try to twist the arm of Congressman Lundgren if he gets reelected.
And you might, when it comes back for approval, you might just want to agendize it. We can put it on the consent agenda or something, just so there's a record.
When what comes back for?
When the-
Well, the letter, I've been advised by Supervisor Thomas that the due date is the 19th.
We need to move quickly.
So as we noted, that if you concur with the major points in the bullets, and we'll work around the wording on that.
All right.
So
we could agendize the ratification of the decision or something. So
That's right. Just go with it. It's just a letter. It's a letter basically asking them to do some things, and if they concur, then we'll bring it back and figure out how we meet our end of the deal.
All right. So I'm asking for a yes or no on whether to authorize staff to complete this and the board chair to sign it.
Yes.
Chair, change chairman to chair.
I think it should be Chair He-Man.
I'm going to stay neutral on this, but
Oh, what do you mean, chicken?
it is a chair. We've always called it a chair, and that's the way it should be. So with that alteration, does that curry your favor?
That and the modification.
All right.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. All right. So that's 5 people saying in the affirmative. I'll expect a new version back, and we'll sign it forthwith, certainly by the 19th. Any further dates, correspondence?
Yes. In the Callaway usual oh, I'm sorry, Russ. did you
We'll
have more?
let Marita complete hers and move to Russ to
Go
complete
ahead,
his.
he was talking. Go ahead.
Well, it's probably a good thing that I got approval on that letter before launching into this particular subject, but I went to candidates forum last night in Murphy's, and one of the first questions that was asked up there, quite surprisingly, my name was mentioned in the question. And then Supervisor Tryon, admittedly he's running for office, so he might be saying things in this particular venue that he wouldn't say otherwise. But Tom, characterizing me, this is a direct quote, Russ is an advocate of rural sprawl. And then you went on to use the development of the Red House Ranch as an example of the worst type of rural sprawl in this county. Now, I would submit to you that that attitude is so wrong-headed. It is such a dinosaur type of a statement that ranch As you well know, it was a 6,800-acre ranch. It had been on the market for about 4.5 years with no buyers. If you thought that it was a viable ranching operation, then you or somebody should have gone ahead out and bought it. It happened to be purchased by my sister and my brother-in-law. And I helped them come up with a land development plan that I think could be, quite honestly, used as a guideline for how to cope with the predicament that many of our old ranching families are in, where they cannot continue to make a living on the properties that they own. Now, 6,800 acres was a huge piece of property, but it had 49 parcels. You know how many parcels it has now? It has 49 parcels. The development, if you want to call it that, this rural sprawl has resulted in no more parcels there today than was there back in 1888. So just dispense with the characterization of Russ Thomas as being an advocate of rural sprawl. It was because of my specific knowledge of that property that I engineered the movement and and it was like through lot line adjustments that we created parcels that were absolutely fabulous, that have been purchased by some wonderful people. Although there are 49 parcels, there are only about 30 owners out there because they have consolidated holdings. Lynn Stenson from Modesto has 1,200 acres of the original 6,800 acres. He's preserved it as a hunting preserve. He's built a fabulous home out there. But by virtue of the fact that that particular ranch was handled in the way that it was handled, in particular, you've got names that are significant in this county now, like Lavender Ridge Winery, that they would not have an opportunity in this county if it had not been for that. You've got Frog's Tooth Winery. You've got Parcel 17 Winery. You've got 40 acres of olives out there, and it's an intensified agricultural use in this county that would have gone away. It had no chance of surviving as a 6,800-acre cattle ranch. With all due respect, knock it off. You have characterized me for the last 2 years as being insane, incompetent. My decisions make no sense at all. You've now called me last night in the forum in Murphy's as an advocate of rural sprawl. Just knock it the hell off.
Well, Russ, I didn't say, I said you were an advocate of what I would define.
You didn't say that.
That's what I said.
You did not. You said Russ is an advocate of rural sprawl.
I would suggest that we take this one outside the public moment, but that there are clearly, and I'll say this as the chair of the board, as this board has descended into the personal abyss over the last few months, that it is my desire that we somehow climb our way out of it. And it will help all of us if we can find ways to discuss our differences without bringing them in sometimes the inappropriate arenas, including personal characterizations done in political, board, or other forums. We got a lot to work out, and the people of this county have actually found it in their interest to select people of very different politics, background, perspective, histories, philosophies, spiritual beliefs, etc. Not to mention 3 political parties represented. That's pretty special for a board of supervisors, and it's unusual.
I thought we were nonpartisan.
Well, I'm just putting it out there here. My hope is that we'll find ways to focus our time on the issues that the public demands resolution on, and a lot less time provoking one another into personal or abstract or even sometimes made-up disputes. And I would hope that that would close this particular discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, now, in the usual Callaway fashion, there's a couple of things I forgot.
You're not clear.
Oh, I'm clear.
You seldom are.
Yeah, I know. I thought you told them to stop picking on us. That's okay.
I gave up, I don't know, a couple of months ago.
At the California State Association of Counties, I'm the board representative. Last week, we went over the propositions that were on the ballot, but two key ones that we opposed were Proposition 5, which is a Nonviolent Funder Rehabilitation Act. It's an expansion of Prop 36. I had talked with our sheriff. I've talked with Dennis Downen, with Jeannie Boyce, and with Jeff Tuttle about these. What it does is it refines and enhances Prop 36. Jeannie's very succinctly said, it's working, drug court's working, let's fund those appropriately and not expand more and more. The second was Prop 6, which had to do with, again, with public safety, and what it would do, it would dedicate general fund, state general fund monies for the COPS program, juvenile justice, and so forth. The sheriff, of course, wanted a yes on Prop 6. I did vote no, Sheriff, because, in case he's listening, or his staff, because that has to do with ballot box budgeting. And we already, as you can tell, we're 70-some days into the state budget. CSAC has taken a strong position on the support of the supervisors of the state that we do not have ballot box budgeting. That would be like the residents of Calaveras County coming in and saying, we want an ordinance dealing with something, and you have to dedicate X amount of your general fund money to it. So because Prop 5, for other reasons also, and Prop 6 required ballot box budgeting, dedicating state general fund money, I voted no. So I think those are really important for you to understand what I did on behalf of this board.
Thank you. And I have a few dates and places to announce. Tonight I'll be at the McCullough Hill community meeting regarding a draft community plan review. I will be at the Parks and Rec Commission meeting on Wednesday. I will be at the Mountain Ranch Community Club meeting on Thursday, and the JPA meeting of the Motherlode Family Support Unit at 10 on Friday. Is there anybody who can substitute? I believe Supervisor Callaway is unable to make that meeting, and we do have two representatives on that meeting. Is there anyone who can come? It would be 10 in the morning at CalWorks.
You said no last week.
Yes.
Did any of you change your mind?
Nobody?
I did talk to Catherine Giannini.
All right, so your position is outlined. All right. And finally, on Sunday, the 21st, I'll be at the Ryan Chavez benefit at Lodestar. One of our kids needs support for that. And that's all I have to say. On the budget, on the state budget and what it means for us.
Yes, and operating pretty much at the 50,000 foot level, but calling into account some of the information that Supervisor Callaway has. The legislature has delivered itself of a $145 billion spending plan for the state, of which $104 billion is general fund monies. It's balanced through a proposal to borrow $10 billion from the lottery, $5 billion each of the 2 next years, and subject to approval by the voters. So if the voters don't go along with that part of the plan, There'll be a $5 billion budget hole punched immediately in each of in this fiscal year at the state and in next fiscal year. It relies upon a 10% increase in income tax withholding, offset by higher refunds to everybody in April. So the state's essentially hitting itself for an interest-free loan. Each California wage earner is being hit up for an interest-free loan to help float the state through April.
Perfect.
It gives the governor the authority if revenues come in lower than expected, it would give the governor authority to make cuts of up to 7% in operations, with the exception of education and health and human services. The Medi-Cal rate cuts that went into effect would remain there through March 2009, and even when those rate cuts come off, California will be the lowest reimbursement state in the country. This is going to have a negative effect on access to health care. If you're a Medi-Cal patient and you can't find a doctor, you might as well not have Medi-Cal. I think there's going to be a net effect, a net negative effect on providers in this community and on our health services agency. There will be some modest dollar amount increases for education and social services. However, ultimately they will translate into program reductions because the dollar amounts are not enough to keep up with increasing program costs. Healthy Family Program participants, they'll be paying higher premium payments. There'll be no COLAs for SSI, Supplemental Security Income recipients. The $8 billion request for borrowing from Mr. Kelso, the federal receiver for prisons, was knocked down. And that would have gone for additional medical facilities and certain capital improvements to new ones. I think this may be getting to the AB 900, that those funds may, if the state's proposing to divert those funds, it may be in partial satisfaction of that. And so that puts us in a really, truly a bad spot. Some good news is that there's no suspension of Prop 1A or Prop 42. So there'll be no, what I would call above-the-line borrowing for local government, but I think a lot of the net effect of what will happen in that budget will be some below-the-line borrowing from local governments and the people who live here. We will be before your board next week with final budget. Between now and then, we'll have staff ascertain the real impacts. The other positive news, at least in the accounts I've seen, we don't have all the details, is that rural sheriff's aid is back in, and there will also be at least a partial restoration of the CalMet funding, which should relieve some of the pressure on the sheriff. As you'll recall, we lost $400,000, which translated to 3 deputies out of the sheriff's office, which were subsequently reassigned. So
is it not a full restoration, but a partial?
It may be a prorated restoration for the through the end of the year. So we'll see how that goes, but. These are things that, fortunately, will be before you in full knowledge by the time we do our final budget next week. So timing's worked out pretty well for us.
What about IHSS share of costs by the state?
I don't have any information on that yet.
Okay. No, that was hanging out.
Yeah. So that's where we are. And I'll let Jim carry the ball the rest of the way to the goal line.
All right, Mr. County Counsel.
I have no additional bad news to report.
Well, that's a relief. And Carol, anything to bring us back up? Nothing. All right. Well, thank you for trying. This concludes the Board of Supervisors meeting. We will reconvene in 17 minutes as the Board of Equalization, and we will grab a quick lunch in between. For those of you who are here for that, you're welcome to wait here. So, Steve.